Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The name's Marcus, and I've been hauling freight through the Midwest for about 12 years now. Most folks don't understand what it's like spending days alone in a cab, watching endless miles of highway disappear under your wheels. Chicago runs were always my bread and butter. Good pay, predictable routes, and usually straightforward deliveries. That changed on a humid Thursday night in August when dispatch sent me to a warehouse on the south side I'd never heard of before. The address led me through industrial districts that looked abandoned even in daylight. By the time I arrived at 11:47 p.m., the whole area felt wrong. Street lights were either broken or flickering, casting these sickly yellow pools of light that made the shadows between them seem deeper. The warehouse itself was a massive concrete structure, probably built in the 60s with rust stains running down its walls like dried blood. I pulled up to the loading dock and killed the engine. The manifest said I was picking up machine parts heading to Detroit, but the paperwork had been vague about specifics. That should have been my first warning. In 12 years of driving, legitimate businesses always had detailed cargo lists. This one just said industrial equipment, with a weight estimate that seemed off. The loading dock was lit by a single floodlight that kept attracting moths, their shadows dancing across the concrete platform. I climbed down from my cab and approached the metal door beside the dock. There was supposed to be someone named Frank meeting me, the foreman, according to dispatch. I knocked 3 times, the sound echoing into nothing. After about 2 minutes, the door opened just wide enough for a face to peer out. The man who looked at me had deep-set eyes and skin that hadn't seen sunlight in years. "You, Marcus?" he asked, his voice scratchy like he'd been breathing in dust all day. "That's me, here for the Detroit load." He nodded slowly, studying me in a way that made my skin crawl. "Yeah, we've been expecting you. Name's Frank. Come on in while my boys get your trailer loaded." Everything in my gut told me to stay outside, but I'd driven 4 hours to get here and needed this paycheck. Lisa, my ex-wife, had been on me about being late with child support again, and turning down a job wasn't an option. So I followed Frank through that narrow door into a hallway that smelled like motor oil and something else, something organic and wrong. The hallway opened into a massive warehouse floor, dimly lit by industrial lights hanging from chains. Most of the space was empty, just concrete stretching into darkness. But there were wooden crates stacked along one wall. Big ones, the kind you'd need a forklift to move. What caught my attention, though, were the workers. There were maybe 6 of them, all wearing identical gray coveralls with no company logo. They moved in this synchronized way, like they'd rehearsed their movements. None of them looked at me directly, just kept their heads down, pushing hand trucks and operating the forklift. One of them, a tall guy with arms like tree trunks, glanced up for just a second. His face was blank, expressionless, but there was something in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or warning. Frank led me to a small office overlooking the warehouse floor. The windows were so grimy I could barely see through them. He offered me coffee from a pot that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in months. I declined. "Paperwork," he said, sliding a clipboard across the desk. "Standard stuff. You acknowledge receipt of cargo, agree to delivery terms, the usual." I picked up the clipboard and started reading. The forms looked official enough, but some details were wrong. The company name at the top, Midwest Industrial Solutions, didn't match what dispatch had given me. The delivery address in Detroit was different too, some warehouse district I wasn't familiar with instead of the auto parts distributor I was supposed to be heading to. "This isn't matching my manifest," I said, setting the clipboard down. Frank's expression didn't change, but his fingers started tapping on the desk, rapid, nervous movements. "Must be a mix-up, happens sometimes. The cargo's the same, though. Machine parts, like you were told." Through the grimy window, I watched the workers loading my trailer. They were moving fast, too fast, like they wanted to get done and get out. One of them, a younger guy who couldn't have been more than 20, kept looking toward the office, then quickly away when he saw me watching. "What kind of machine parts exactly?" I asked. "Industrial processing equipment, completely legal, all documented." Frank pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. "See? Import papers, certificates, everything's in order." I flipped through the papers, but half of them were in languages I didn't recognize. The ones in English were full of technical jargon that meant nothing to me. But what caught my eye were the weight specifications. Each crate was listed at exactly 800 pounds. That kind of uniformity didn't happen with mixed machine parts. A loud crash echoed through the warehouse. Through the window, I saw one of the workers had dropped something, and Frank jumped up so fast his chair scraped against the concrete floor. His calm demeanor cracked for just a second, and I saw something else: panic. "Wait here," he said, already heading for the door. "I need to check on that." The moment he left, I pulled out my phone to call dispatch, but there was no signal. Not unusual in these old concrete buildings, but the timing felt wrong. I stood up and moved to the window for a better view of what was happening on the warehouse floor. The workers had gathered around the dropped item, and even from up here I could see they were agitated. One of them, the tall one with the tree trunk arms, was gesturing wildly at Frank. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. Something had gone very wrong. That's when I noticed movement in the darker part of the warehouse, beyond where the lights reached. Shadows shifting in ways that didn't match the workers' movements. There were other people back there, standing still, watching. I couldn't make out details, but I counted at least 4 figures just standing in the darkness. Frank looked up at the office window and saw me watching. His face changed, hardened into something cold. He said something to the tall worker, who immediately started walking toward the stairs leading up to the office. Not running, but walking with purpose, and something about his measured pace was more frightening than if he'd been sprinting. I grabbed my keys and headed for the office door, but it wouldn't budge. The handle turned, but the door itself was stuck, like something was blocking it from the outside. Through the small window in the door, I could see the tall worker, Dennis, according to the name stitched on his coveralls, coming up the stairs. His face was still blank, but his hands were clenched into fists. The window. It was my only option. These old industrial windows were designed to open for ventilation, and I yanked on the rusted latch until it gave way with a screech. The window swung open, and cool night air flooded in along with the sounds from below. Voices now, urgent and angry. Dennis was at the door, trying the handle. When it didn't open immediately, he stepped back, and I knew he was about to kick it in. The office was on the 2nd floor, about 15 feet up, with nothing but concrete below. But staying meant finding out what Frank and his crew really wanted, and every instinct I'd developed in 12 years of driving was screaming that it wasn't good. I climbed through the window just as the door exploded inward. Dennis rushed in, his eyes scanning the room, then locking onto me half out of the window. For a second, we just stared at each other, and in that moment, I saw something in his expression change. A flicker of something. Maybe regret. Maybe relief that I was escaping. "Go," he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Now. I didn't need to be told twice. I dropped from the window, hitting the concrete hard. Pain shot through my ankles, but adrenaline kept me moving. My truck was only 50 yards away, but it felt like miles. Behind me I could hear shouting, doors slamming, feet on concrete. The trailer was still open, partially loaded with those identical crates. I didn't care. I needed to get out of there. I yanked myself up into the cab, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so bad I could barely get them in the ignition. The engine roared to life just as Frank appeared in my side mirror, running toward the truck with 3 other men. One of them was carrying something, a crowbar maybe, or worse. I slammed the truck into gear and started rolling, even as they reached the trailer. One of them actually grabbed onto the back, trying to climb up. But as I picked up speed heading for the gate, he had to let go or risk being dragged. In my mirrors, I watched them standing in the floodlight. Frank pulling out a phone, probably calling whoever was really in charge of this operation. The gate was closed, of course. A chain-link fence with a padlock, but I had 40,000 pounds of truck and whatever they'd loaded in my trailer. I barely slowed down, crashing through it in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The truck lurched, the trailer fishtailed, but I kept control, muscling it onto the street. I drove for 3 miles before I felt safe enough to pull over and check the damage. The front bumper was dented, the paint scraped, but nothing mechanical seemed broken. I walked back to the trailer, my legs still shaking, and looked inside. 5 crates, all identical, all sealed tight. Whatever was in them, it wasn't machine parts. The weight distribution was all wrong, and there was a smell coming from them. Chemical, sharp, like cleaning products mixed with something else. Each crate had a small vent on the side, covered with mesh, like whatever was inside needed air. I stood there in the empty parking lot of a closed gas station, staring at those crates in my trailer, while my hands finally stopped shaking. The smart thing would have been to call the police right then, but I needed to think. Whatever was in those crates, Frank and his crew had been desperate to load them onto my truck. And now I had their cargo, which meant they'd be looking for me. I climbed back into the cab and started driving, taking random turns through the industrial district to make sure nobody was following. The streets were empty except for the occasional security light and a few stray cats darting between dumpsters. After about 20 minutes of circling, I pulled into a 24-hour truck stop off Interstate 94. The bright lights and presence of other truckers made me feel safer, even though I knew it was temporary. I parked between 2 other rigs and sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. The clock on my dashboard read 1:23 a.m. In my 12 years of driving, I'd dealt with sketchy customers, dangerous loads, and more than my share of close calls. But this was different. This felt organized, deliberate, like I'd stumbled into something much bigger than a simple cargo theft. My phone finally had signal, and I thought about calling dispatch. But what would I tell them? That I'd run from a warehouse with half a load because the workers looked scary. They'd think I'd lost my mind. Or worse, they might be in on it. The whole job had come through dispatch after all. Instead, I called Tommy, an old friend who'd been driving these routes for 25 years. If anyone would know what to do, it would be him. The phone rang 4 times before his gruff voice answered. "Marcus? Hell, man, it's almost 2 in the morning. Tommy, I need your help. Something's not right with this load I picked up." I could hear him sitting up in bed, suddenly alert. "Where are you?" "Truck stop off 94. South side pickup went bad. Real bad. Stay put. I'm 15 minutes out. Don't talk to anyone. Don't open that trailer and keep your doors locked." While I waited, I kept watching the mirrors, expecting to see Frank's crew pull into the lot any second. Every set of headlights that swept across the parking lot made my pulse spike. A few other truckers walked past, heading into the stop for coffee or a shower, completely oblivious to what I was carrying. Tommy's rig pulled in exactly 14 minutes later, a beat-up Kenworth that had seen better days but ran like a dream. He parked next to me and climbed down, all 6'4" of him, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt he'd obviously just thrown on. His gray beard was wild from sleep, but his eyes were sharp and concerned. "Show me," he said simply. I led him around to the back of my trailer, checking over my shoulder constantly. When I opened the doors, that chemical smell hit us both immediately. Tommy's nose wrinkled, and he pulled out a small flashlight from his pocket. "Jesus Christ, Marcus, you know what this smells like?" I shook my head. Formaldehyde, mixed with something else, but definitely formaldehyde. He climbed up into the trailer, examining the crates more closely. "These vents, this is how you transport something that needs preservation but can't be frozen." My stomach dropped. "You mean like medical specimens maybe, or something worse?" He jumped down, his face grim. "You said the pickup went bad. Tell me everything." I ran through the whole story. Frank, Dennis, the workers in gray coveralls, the figures in the shadows, the office window escape. Tommy listened without interrupting, but I could see his jaw clenching tighter with each detail. "Marcus, you need to listen very carefully," he said when I finished. "There have been rumors for months about organ trafficking through Chicago, truckers disappearing with refrigerated loads, bodies found weeks later missing parts. The FBI's been sniffing around, but nothing solid." "Organs? You think these crates have human organs?" "I don't know what's in them, and we're not going to find out. You're going to call 911 right now, report a suspicious load, and let them handle it. But first, we need to make sure you're safe." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Marcus." It was Frank's voice, calm, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. "You have something that belongs to us. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't be stupid. We know where you are. That truck stop off 94, right? Nice choice. Public, well lit, lots of witnesses. Smart thinking." I looked around frantically but couldn't spot anyone watching us. Tommy must have seen my panic because he pulled out his own phone and started dialing. "Here's what's going to happen," Frank continued. "You're going to drive that trailer to a new address I'm about to give you. You're going to leave it there, keys in the ignition, and walk away. You do that and we forget this whole thing happened. You don't and things get complicated. I'm calling the police." "No, you're not. Because if you do, they'll find evidence in your cab linking you to some very serious crimes. Evidence we planted while you were in my office. Check under your passenger seat if you don't believe me." My blood went cold. I climbed back into the cab, Tommy following, and reached under the passenger seat. My fingers found a plastic bag taped to the underside. Inside was a small pistol and what looked like several bloody ID cards. "Found it?" Frank asked. "That gun was used in 3 murders last month. Your fingerprints are all over it now. The IDs belong to missing persons. How do you think that'll look to the police?" Tommy grabbed the phone from me. "This is Thomas Rodriguez. I'm with Marcus, and we've already called the state police. They're en route. You want to add threatening a witness to your charges?" There was silence on the other end. Then Frank laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound. "Rodriguez, I should have known you'd get involved. Always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." "I know who you are, Frank Morrison," Tommy said, and I saw something change in his expression. "Yeah, that's right. I know exactly who you are. What you did to those drivers in Indianapolis. What you're running through Chicago. And I know you're not the one really in charge." More silence. Then Frank's voice came back. Different now. Worried. "You don't know what you're dealing with, old man." "I know enough. I know your boss doesn't like attention. I know the feds are already watching 3 of your warehouses. And I know that if anything happens to Marcus or me, There's an envelope with names, dates, and locations that goes straight to the FBI field office. This was news to me, but I kept my mouth shut. Tommy was bluffing, or maybe he wasn't. With him, you could never tell. "You're making a mistake," Frank said. "No, you made the mistake when you tried to use my friend as a mule. Here's what's really going to happen. Marcus is going to drive that trailer straight to the state police impound lot. They're going to open those crates with a full forensics team present, and you're going to disappear back into whatever hole you crawled out of. The evidence in his cab is planted evidence, which any decent forensics tech will figure out in minutes. Try again." I could hear Frank breathing heavily on the other end. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Tommy said, and hung up. He immediately started making calls, not to 911, but to numbers he had memorized. Old contacts, other truckers, people who knew people. Within 10 minutes, he'd arranged for 3 other drivers to escort us to the state police station. "Safety in numbers," he said. "How do you know about Frank Morrison?" I asked while we waited. Tommy's face was grim. "Lost a friend to his crew 2 years ago. Been keeping tabs on them ever since. They target independent drivers, ones without family, people who won't be missed quickly. You're lucky you got out when you did. What about the planted evidence? We'll deal with it, but we're not touching it again. Let the cops handle it with proper procedures." The other drivers arrived within 20 minutes. 3 guys I'd seen around but never really talked to. They formed a convoy around my truck, and we drove together through the empty Chicago streets toward the state police station. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting Frank's crew to come after us, but the roads stayed clear. It was almost 4 a.m. when we pulled into the police station. The desk sergeant looked confused at first, seeing 4 trucks pull up, but Tommy had called ahead. Within minutes, we were surrounded by officers, and a detective named Patricia Hoffman was taking my statement. They found the planted evidence exactly where Frank had said it would be. But like Tommy predicted, it was obviously planted. No dust disruption, fresh tape, fingerprints too perfect to be natural. The forensics team seemed almost excited by how sloppy it was. As for the crates, I never found out what was really in them. Detective Hoffman said it was part of an ongoing investigation and that I'd have to testify eventually, but for now, I was free to go. They impounded my truck as evidence, which meant I was out of work, but honestly, I was just grateful to be alive. Tommy drove me home in his truck as the sun was coming up, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of orange and pink. We didn't talk much, both of us processing what had happened. "You saved my life," I finally said as he pulled up to my apartment. "You saved your own life when you jumped out that window," he replied. "I just helped with the cleanup." The next 3 weeks were hell. I couldn't work because my truck was still impounded as evidence. The company I'd been contracting for dropped me like a hot potato, said I was too much of a liability. Bills started piling up, and Lisa was calling about the child support again. But worse than all of that was the waiting. Waiting for Frank and his crew to come after me. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Detective Hoffman called me in for follow-up interviews twice. Each time, she looked more tired, more frustrated. The investigation wasn't going well, she admitted. The warehouse I'd gone to was empty when they'd raided it 12 hours after my escape. Completely cleaned out. No workers, no equipment, no trace of Frank Morrison or anyone else. Even the office I'd been locked in had been stripped down to the concrete walls. "It's like they were never there," she said during our second meeting, sliding a folder across the table to me. "These are the only things we found." Inside were photos of the warehouse, empty and echoing. But in one corner, barely visible, was something that made my skin crawl. Scratch marks on the concrete floor, like something heavy had been dragged repeatedly. Or someone. The crates from your trailer, Hoffman continued, contained medical equipment. Legitimate medical equipment according to our forensics team, surgical tools, preservation chemicals, portable refrigeration units. All of it legal to transport, all of it with forged but convincing documentation. But Tommy said the smell was formaldehyde. It was, used for preserving medical specimens. The equipment could be used for legitimate purposes, or... She let the sentence hang. We both knew what the "or" implied. So, you've got nothing. I wouldn't say nothing. We've connected this to similar incidents in Milwaukee, Detroit, and Cleveland. Same pattern. Truckers approached for rushed nighttime pickups, suspicious cargo, and when things go wrong, everything disappears within hours. She pulled out another photo, this one of a man I didn't recognize. Heavy set, balding, with eyes that looked dead even in the driver's license photo. Carl Brennan, she said. Found dead in his truck 6 weeks ago outside Gary, Indiana. Heart attack according to the coroner. But he'd told his wife the night before that he was scared, that he'd seen something he shouldn't have during a pickup. You think Frank killed him? I think Carl saw what was really in those crates. And I think you're lucky you didn't. I left that meeting feeling worse than when I'd arrived. The police had nothing. Frank was still out there, and I was a loose end in whatever operation they were running. Tommy kept checking on me, bringing groceries when I couldn't afford them, offering to lend me money that we both knew I'd never be able to pay back. He'd set me up with a lawyer, too. Some guy who specialized in helping truckers who'd gotten tangled up in criminal investigations. But even with all that help, I was drowning. Then, exactly 3 weeks and 2 days after the warehouse incident, I got a call at 3 a.m. My phone rang, showing unknown number, and every instinct told me not to answer. But I was half asleep, and my hand moved before my brain could stop it. Hello? Breathing. Just breathing for about 10 seconds. Then a voice I recognized but hadn't heard that night at the warehouse. Younger, nervous. You Marcus, the driver? I sat up, suddenly wide awake. Who is this? My name's Dennis. I was at the warehouse that night, the tall one who came up to the office. My hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? To warn you. They're coming for you. Not tonight, but soon. Frank's boss, the real boss, he's decided you know too much. I don't know anything. The cops found nothing. The investigation's going nowhere. Doesn't matter. You saw us, you can identify Frank, and you got away. That makes you a problem. There was a pause, and I could hear traffic in the background, like he was calling from a payphone near a highway. They've been watching you. Know you're broke. Desperate. They're going to make you an offer you can't refuse, and if you refuse it anyway, why are you telling me this? Another pause, longer this time. Because I didn't sign up for this. When Frank recruited me, he said it was just moving cargo, making quick money. I didn't know about what was really happening, not until it was too late to get out. What was really happening? What was in those crates? You don't want to know. Trust me, you don't. But I can tell you this, it's bigger than Chicago. There's a whole network, coast to coast. Truckers are just the transportation, expendable. They've got doctors, cops, people you'd never suspect. Dennis, if you know all this, you need to go to the police. He laughed bitterly. With what proof? And how long do you think I'd last? No, I'm getting out tonight. Leaving the state, maybe the country. But I owed you this warning. You jumped out that window because you knew something was wrong. That saved your life once. Don't ignore your instincts again. Wait, if they're planning something, I need more information. 4th Street Dock, Warehouse 17. They're moving the whole operation there tomorrow night. After that, they'll come for you. You've got maybe 36 hours to disappear." The line went dead. I immediately tried calling back, but the number was blocked. I sat there in my dark apartment, phone in my hand, trying to process what I'd just heard. Part of me wanted to call Detective Hoffman right away, tell her about the 4th Street location. But Dennis was right. Without proof, what good would it do? I spent the rest of the night packing. Not much to pack, really. My life had shrunk down to what could fit in 2 duffel bags. I called Tommy at dawn, told him about the warning. He didn't question it, didn't try to talk me out of running. He just asked where I wanted to go. "I've got a cousin in Oregon," he said. "Runs a small trucking company, always needs drivers. I can get you there, get you set up with new papers, new name if necessary." "Tommy, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. These people, Frank and whoever's above him, they've taken too much from too many. At least I can save one." We agreed to meet that evening at a truck stop outside the city. I spent the day tying up loose ends, calling Lisa to explain I'd be out of touch for a while, leaving a detailed letter for Detective Hoffman with everything Dennis had told me, closing out my bank account, which had all of $43 left in it. As the sun started setting, I took one last look around my apartment. It wasn't much, but it had been home. Now I was about to become another missing trucker, another statistic in whatever dark operation Frank and his network were running. I made it to the truck stop without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every car that followed me for more than a few blocks made me paranoid. Every face in the crowd seemed suspicious. Tommy was already there when I arrived, his truck running, ready to go. "Get in," he said. No preamble. "We're taking the long way, lots of detours. If anyone's following, we'll lose them." As we pulled out of the truck stop, heading west toward a new life I hadn't planned for, I thought about Dennis's warning. 4th Street Dock, Warehouse 17, tomorrow night. I'd left that information for Detective Hoffman, but would she act on it? Would it make any difference? Tommy must have sensed my thoughts. "You did the right thing, Marcus. Sometimes the brave choice isn't to fight. Sometimes it's to survive." We drove through the night, taking back roads and switching vehicles twice at truck stops where Tommy had friends waiting. Each mile that passed between me and Chicago made me feel a little safer, but also a little more angry. Frank and his crew were still out there, still operating, still preying on drivers who just wanted to make an honest living. 3 days later, when we finally reached Oregon, Tommy's cousin Jake was waiting for us. He was nothing like Tommy, shorter, rounder, with a perpetual smile that seemed genuine. He'd set me up with a small apartment, a new ID that would pass basic scrutiny, and most importantly, a job driving local roads. No more long hauls, no more midnight pickups, no more suspicious cargo. "Tommy told me you had some trouble," Jake said, shaking my hand. "Don't worry about it. Out here, you're just another driver. Keep your head down, do good work, and the past stays in the past." For a week, that seemed possible. I learned my new routes, met the other drivers, started to remember what normal felt like. Then I saw the news report. It was just a small item, buried in the Chicago Tribune's online edition, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. FBI raids empty warehouse in failed human trafficking sting. The article was brief. Federal agents, acting on an anonymous tip, had raided Warehouse 17 at 4th Street Dock, expecting to find evidence of a human organ trafficking ring. Instead, they found an empty building that had been thoroughly cleaned with industrial chemicals. No arrests were made, but there was one detail that made my blood run cold. A security guard at a nearby building reported seeing multiple semi-trucks leaving the dock area the night before the raid, approximately 6 hours after the FBI received the anonymous tip. They'd known. Somehow, Frank's network had known about the raid in advance, which meant they had someone inside law enforcement, someone high enough to access confidential information. I called Tommy from a payphone, using the code we'd established. He answered on the second ring. "You see the news?" I asked. "Yeah, Dennis was right about one thing. It's bigger than we thought. What do I do now?" "What you've been doing. Stay quiet, stay safe. Let the feds figure it out." But I couldn't let it go. Not completely. I started researching, carefully, using library computers and public Wi-Fi, looking for patterns in trucker disappearances, suspicious deaths, missing persons reports that might connect to organ trafficking. What I found was terrifying in its scope. Over the next 6 months, I documented everything I could find. 17 truckers had gone missing along routes between Chicago and Detroit in the past 2 years. 8 more between Chicago and Milwaukee. All independent operators, all running refrigerated loads, all vanishing without a trace. Their trucks would turn up days or weeks later, always stripped clean, always wiped down with industrial chemicals that destroyed any forensic evidence. But it was the pattern of organ shortage reports that really connected the dots. Every time a cluster of trucker disappearances happened, organ availability in certain private medical facilities would spike 2 to 3 weeks later. Not the legitimate transplant centers that followed federal guidelines, but the gray market clinics that served wealthy clients who couldn't wait for official donor lists. I was careful with my research, never staying on any one computer too long, never searching from the same location twice. Jake thought I was just dealing with trauma in my own way, and Tommy kept telling me to let it go. But I couldn't. Those 17 missing truckers had families, friends, people who deserved to know what happened to them. It was a Tuesday in May when everything came to a head. I just finished a local delivery run, dropping off restaurant supplies around Portland, when I noticed a black sedan following me. Not obviously, but professionally. Staying 3 cars back, switching lanes when I did, taking every turn, my blood went cold, and all the paranoia from 6 months ago came flooding back. I called Tommy immediately. "I've got a tail." "You sure?" "Black sedan, tinted windows, been on me for the last 4 miles. Come to the yard, now. Don't go home." Jake's trucking yard was in an industrial area surrounded by other businesses and equipped with security cameras. I made it there in 15 minutes, the sedan following the entire way. When I pulled through the gates, the sedan slowed, stopped about a block away, then slowly drove past. I couldn't see the driver through the tinted windows, but I knew they were watching. Tommy was waiting for me, along with Jake and 3 other drivers I'd gotten to know over the months. They looked grim, ready for trouble. "Could be nothing," Jake said, but his hand was resting on the baseball bat he kept in his office. "It's not nothing," I said. "They found me." We waited 2 hours, but the sedan didn't come back. Finally, as the sun was setting, Tommy made a decision. "We're getting you out of here, tonight. I know a guy in Canada, completely off the grid. You can lay low there until we figure out what's happening." But as we were loading my few belongings into Tommy's truck, my phone rang. It was Detective Hoffman's number. "Marcus? Thank God. Listen, you need to know something. Frank Morrison was found dead this morning." My knees almost buckled. "What? How?" "Execution style, 2 bullets to the head. His body was dumped at that warehouse you escaped from, Marcus. There was a note pinned to his chest. It had your current alias and location on it." The blood drained from my face. Frank was dead, and someone wanted me to know about it. Someone who knew exactly where I was. "Detective, what's going on?" "Internal war. That's our best guess. Frank was middle management and he failed to contain the situation with you. His bosses cleaned house, but Marcus, If they know where you are, they're already here. I had a tail today. Get out, now. Don't go to the police. Don't trust anyone you don't know personally. This goes higher than we thought. There's corruption in multiple departments. I shouldn't even be calling you, but I couldn't let you get blindsided. She hung up before I could respond. I looked at Tommy and Jake, both of whom had heard enough to understand the situation. Canada's not far enough, Tommy said quietly. If they've got people in the FBI, they've got reach everywhere. That's when we heard it. Engines, multiple vehicles approaching the yard. Through the gate, I could see 3 black SUVs pulling up, blocking the entrance. Men in dark clothes getting out, not rushing, just positioning themselves strategically. Back door, Jake said immediately. Through the maintenance shop. We ran, all of us, abandoning any pretense of normal. The maintenance shop connected to an alley that led to the next street over. Behind us, I could hear car doors slamming, voices shouting commands. They weren't trying to be subtle anymore. Jake had an old pickup truck parked in the alley, keys always in it for emergencies. We piled in, me, Tommy, Jake, and 2 other drivers named Robert and Paul. Jake gunned it, tires squealing as we tore out of the alley just as the first pursuers rounded the corner of the building. Where? Jake asked, taking corners at dangerous speeds. Airport, Tommy said. It's public, cameras everywhere. They won't try anything there. But I knew better. These people had killed Frank Morrison and dumped his body as a message. They weren't afraid of cameras or witnesses anymore. No, I said. The FBI field office. Detective Hoffman said not to trust local police, but the FBI is our only shot. Jake nodded and changed direction, heading downtown. In the mirrors, I could see headlights following. Not close, but persistent. They knew where we were going and didn't seem concerned about it. This is wrong, Paul said, voicing what we were all thinking. If they're not worried about the FBI, then they've got someone inside, Tommy finished. But what choice do we have? My phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Marcus. The voice was cultured, calm, nothing like Frank's rough edges. Or should I say your current alias? Doesn't matter. What matters is that you've caused us considerable inconvenience. Who is this? Someone who's offering you a final chance at a resolution. Frank Morrison was a fool who exceeded his authority. His threats, his methods, all unsanctioned. We're not unreasonable people, Marcus. We're businessmen. Businessmen who traffic in human organs. A pause. We provide a service to those who can afford it. Supply and demand, nothing more. You stumbled into something you shouldn't have, but that's Frank's fault, not yours. We're prepared to compensate you for your trouble. Significantly. I don't want your money. $500,000, cash. All you have to do is forget everything you've seen, everything you think you know. Stop your research, stop talking to law enforcement, and disappear. We'll even help with that part. New identity, new country, completely fresh start. Jake was pulling up to the FBI building. The black SUVs were still following, hanging back a block, just watching. And if I refuse, then you become a problem that needs solving. And we're very good at solving problems, Marcus. Ask Frank Morrison. Oh, wait, you can't. The line went dead. We sat in the truck outside the FBI building, engine running, all of us staring at the imposing federal structure. The SUVs had parked across the street, waiting. $500,000, Robert said quietly. That's more money than any of us will see in a lifetime. Blood money, Tommy spat. From the organs of dead truckers. We don't know they're dead, Paul said, but his voice was weak, unconvincing. I looked at each of them, these men who'd risked everything to help me, and made my decision. You guys drive away, right now. This is my fight, not yours. Like hell, Tommy said. Tommy, they're offering me money to disappear. That means they want this to end quietly. If I go in there and make a federal case literally, they lose that option. But you guys don't need to be part of it. Jake shook his head. We're already part of it, son. The moment we helped you, we became witnesses. I knew he was right. We all got out together, walking toward the FBI building as a group. The men in the SUVs watched but didn't move, not yet. The federal building's lobby was bright, sterile, with metal detectors and armed guards. We must have looked like quite a sight. 5 truckers, sweaty and scared, demanding to speak to someone about organ trafficking and murder. But Detective Hoffman had called ahead. An agent named Mitchell was waiting for us. What followed were 3 days of interviews, protective custody, and revelations that went deeper than any of us had imagined. The network wasn't just trafficking organs. They were running an entire black market medical system. Wealthy clients would order specific organs, and the network would find donors that matched. Sometimes they were homeless people who wouldn't be missed. Sometimes they were travelers passing through. And sometimes they were truckers carrying refrigerated loads that could hide the evidence. Frank Morrison had been middle management, just as Hoffman suspected. Above him was a structure that included doctors, hospital administrators, even organ transport coordinators at legitimate facilities. They'd been operating for at least 5 years, spreading across 12 states, generating hundreds of millions in profit. My testimony, combined with the evidence I'd gathered over 6 months of careful research, gave the FBI enough to launch Operation Cold Chain. It would become one of the largest medical fraud and human trafficking investigations in U.S. history. Over the next year, they arrested 47 people, including 3 prominent surgeons and a state health department official. But the man who called me that night, the calm voice who offered me $500,000 to disappear, they never found him. The investigation revealed he was known only as the coordinator, and every trail led to dead ends and shell companies registered in countries with no extradition treaties. I testified in 8 different trials, always under heavy protection. Tommy, Jake, and the others had to relocate too, their lives upended because they'd chosen to help me. The guilt from that still keeps me awake some nights. It's been 3 years now since that night at the warehouse. I don't drive trucks anymore. The FBI helped me get a new career, a new life in a place I can't mention. But sometimes I dream about it. The empty warehouse, Frank's desperate face, Dennis warning me to run. The 17 missing truckers who were never found. The official story is that Operation Cold Chain was a success, that the network was dismantled. But I know better. I still monitor trucker forums, still track disappearances, still see the patterns. They're more careful now, more subtle, but they're still out there. The coordinator is still out there. Every time I see a semi on the highway, especially the refrigerated ones, I think about the drivers. Are they safe? Do they know what they might be carrying? Do they have someone like Tommy watching their backs? I survived because I listened to my instincts, because I jumped out that window when every rational thought said to stay put and play along. But 17 others didn't get that chance. Their families got closed casket funerals with official explanations about highway accidents and heart attacks. Only a few of us know the truth about what really happened to them. Sometimes reporters call, wanting to write books or make documentaries about Operation Cold Chain. I always decline, not because I'm afraid anymore, but because the story isn't over. Somewhere out there, in a warehouse just like the one I escaped from, someone is loading mysterious crates onto another trucker's rig, And that trucker has no idea that their life is about to change forever, if they're lucky enough to keep it at all. The real horror isn't what happened to me that night in Chicago. It's knowing that it's still happening, right now, to someone else. And there's nothing I can do to stop it. I still keep in touch with Tommy, though we're careful about how we communicate. He's retired now, living somewhere warm, trying to forget. But I know he monitors the forums too, watches for patterns, warns drivers when he can. We're the survivors of something that officially doesn't exist anymore. Witnesses to a darkness that runs deeper than anyone wants to admit. That's my story. Every word of it true, though you'll never find official confirmation. The FBI made sure of that. Too much panic, they said, if people knew how extensive it really was. Better to let everyone think it's over, that the bad guys were caught, that the highways are safe. But if you're a trucker reading this, especially if you haul refrigerated loads, remember what happened to me. Trust your instincts. If a pickup feels wrong, if the warehouse looks abandoned, if the workers won't meet your eyes, get out. Don't worry about the job, the money, the consequences. Just get out. Because somewhere in Chicago, or Detroit, or any city with desperate people in dark corners, there's another Frank Morrison waiting with another warehouse full of secrets. And the next driver who walks through those doors might not be lucky enough to find an open window. My name is Cornelius, though most folks just call me Neil. I've been driving 18-wheelers for nearly 20 years, and in all that time, I thought I'd seen everything the road could throw at me. Ice storms, jackknife trailers, highway robberies, you name it, I'd survived it. But what happened during that blizzard in February just outside Chicago still makes my hands shake when I think about it. I was hauling a load of pharmaceutical supplies from a distribution center in Indianapolis to a hospital network in Chicago. Time-sensitive stuff, antibiotics, insulin, vaccines that needed to stay refrigerated. The kind of cargo that couldn't wait for better weather. The forecast had called for snow, maybe 6 to 8 inches, but nothing I hadn't handled before. By the time I hit Interstate 65 heading north, though, it was clear the weathermen had gotten it wrong again. The snow was coming down sideways, these thick, heavy flakes that stuck to everything immediately. My windshield wipers were working overtime, and even with the defroster on full blast, ice kept building up on the edges of the glass. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the last hour, turning what should have been manageable snow into a full-scale blizzard. I was about 40 miles south of Chicago, near Crown Point, when things went from bad to worse. The wind picked up to what had to be 50 miles per hour, gusting even higher, pushing my trailer around like it was made of cardboard instead of steel. I could feel the whole rig swaying, that sick sensation when you know you're right on the edge of losing control. The smart thing would have been to pull off at the next exit, find a truck stop, and wait it out. But the next exit was 8 miles away according to my GPS, and visibility was dropping fast. I was down to maybe 20 feet, just following the barely visible taillights of a car ahead of me, hoping they knew where they were going. That's when it happened. A gust of wind, stronger than the others, caught my trailer at just the wrong angle. I felt the back end start to slide, that helpless feeling when 80,000 pounds of truck and cargo decides to go its own way. I turned into the skid, trying to correct it, but the ice underneath gave me nothing to work with. The trailer kept sliding, jackknifing slowly but inevitably. The car ahead of me disappeared into the white void. I pumped the brakes, fighting for any kind of traction, but it was like driving on glass covered in oil. The truck spun almost gracefully like some massive ballet dancer until I was facing the wrong direction on the interstate. Then the momentum caught up, and the whole rig tipped. The crash was almost peaceful in a way, Everything went into slow motion as the truck rolled onto its right side, sliding along the icy pavement in a shower of sparks and screaming metal. The windshield exploded inward, pelting me with safety glass and snow. My coffee mug, which had been in the cup holder for the last 100 miles, flew past my head and shattered against the sleeper compartment wall. When everything finally stopped moving, I was hanging sideways in my seatbelt, looking down at the passenger door, which was now flat against the pavement. Snow was pouring in through the broken windshield, already starting to accumulate on everything. The engine had died, leaving only the sound of wind howling through the cab. My first thought was fire. Diesel fuel, hot engine, electrical systems. All bad combinations after a crash. I reached for the seatbelt release, but my hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get it unlatched. When it finally released, I fell hard against the passenger door, pain shooting through my ribs. I could smell diesel, which meant the tanks were leaking. I needed to get out fast. The driver's side door was now above me, like a hatch. I pushed up on it, but the wind immediately grabbed it, trying to tear it from my hands. Using all my strength, I managed to pull myself up and out, dropping down onto the icy road surface. The cold hit me like a physical thing, stealing my breath. I was wearing my usual winter gear, insulated jacket, work boots, thermal gloves, but the wind cut right through everything. The temperature had to be below 0, not counting wind chill. My truck was blocking one lane and part of another, hazard lights still somehow blinking their warning into the storm. I grabbed my emergency kit from the side box that was still accessible, then moved away from the truck in case it caught fire. That's when I realized how truly bad my situation was. I couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. The interstate had transformed into an Arctic wasteland. No other vehicles visible, no lights except my dying hazards, no sound except wind. My phone had been in the center console and was probably somewhere in the wreckage. Even if I found it, cell towers were probably down in this weather. I was alone, injured. My ribs were definitely bruised, if not cracked, and rapidly losing body heat. I'd been standing there maybe 2 minutes trying to figure out my next move when I heard it through the wind, an engine. Headlights appeared like yellow eyes in the white, approaching slowly. A pickup truck materialized from the storm, a big Ford F-350, dark blue or black, hard to tell in the conditions. It stopped about 30 feet from my overturned rig. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a heavy parka with the hood up, face mostly hidden by a scarf. He walked toward me with confident steps despite the ice, like he was used to these conditions. "Hell of a mess," he called out over the wind. "You hurt?" "Ribs," I shouted back. "But I can walk." He came closer, and I could see his eyes above the scarf, pale blue, almost gray, studying me and the wreck with an intensity that seemed odd for a good Samaritan. "Name's Jasper," he said. "We need to get you out of this weather before you freeze to death." Something in my gut, that trucker's instinct that had kept me alive for 20 years, whispered a warning. But what choice did I have? Stay here and freeze, or accept help from a stranger? "Got a phone?" I asked. "Need to call this in." "Towers are down all over," Jasper said, already heading back to his truck. "Come on, I know a place about 10 minutes from here where you can warm up and wait for the storm to pass." I hesitated, looking back at my rig. $40,000 worth of medical supplies slowly freezing in that trailer. My entire livelihood lying on its side in the snow. But Jasper was right. I'd be dead from hypothermia long before any official help arrived. I followed him to the pickup, each step careful on the ice. When I climbed into the passenger seat, the heat hit me like a blessing. The interior was immaculate, almost obsessively clean. No fast food wrappers, no coffee stains, no personal items at all. Just leather seats and that new car smell, which seemed impossible for a truck that had to be at least 5 years old. Jasper climbed in and put the truck in drive, navigating around my wreck with practiced ease. "Lucky I came along," he said, his voice muffled by the scarf he still hadn't removed. "Not many people stupid enough to be out in this." "I had a delivery schedule to keep," I said, teeth still chattering. "Medical supplies, right? Saw the hazmat placards on your trailer." That gave me pause. It would have been almost impossible to read those placards in this visibility, especially with the truck on its side. But maybe he'd just made an educated guess based on the refrigeration unit. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the truck handling the icy roads surprisingly well. Jasper seemed to know exactly where he was despite the near-zero visibility, taking turns without hesitation, never slowing to check street signs or landmarks. "You from around here?" I asked. "You could say that. Born and raised in Indiana, know these roads like the back of my hand. Lucky for me." He glanced over, and for just a second, I saw his eyes crinkle like he was smiling under that scarf. "Yeah, lucky." We turned off what I assumed was still the interstate onto a smaller road. The snow was even deeper here, no tire tracks except ours. The trees pressed in close on both sides, their branches heavy with white, creating a tunnel effect that made the darkness even more oppressive. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked, that uneasy feeling growing stronger. "Friend of mine has a hunting cabin not far from here. Got a generator, wood stove, everything you need to ride out a storm like this. He won't mind us using it." "Maybe we should just head to the nearest town instead." "Nearest town is Lowell, and it's 15 miles in the opposite direction. You really want to risk that in this weather?" He had a point, but something was off. The way he drove with such confidence in zero visibility, the way he'd appeared so quickly after my crash, the complete absence of any personal touches in his supposedly well-used truck. "Actually," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, "if you could just drop me at the next gas station or anywhere with people, that would be great." Jasper didn't respond immediately. When he did, his tone had changed slightly, still friendly but with an edge underneath. "No gas stations out this way. Besides, you're hypothermic whether you realize it or not. Your lips are blue, you're shaking, and your speech is starting to slur. You need immediate warmth and medical attention." He was right about the shaking, but my speech wasn't slurred. I'd been careful to speak clearly despite the cold, which meant he was either mistaken or lying to justify not taking me where I wanted to go. We turned again, onto what couldn't even be called a road anymore. Just a break in the trees barely wide enough for the truck. The branches scraped against the sides, creating an eerie scraping sound that reminded me of fingernails on metal. "Listen, Jasper," I started, but he cut me off. "Almost there. You'll see. This is the best option. My friend actually used to be an EMT, might still have some medical supplies that could help with those ribs." Another red flag. I hadn't mentioned my ribs hurting since that first exchange by my truck. No visible injuries, no wincing, nothing that would indicate where I was hurt. Yet he remembered that specific detail from our brief conversation in the howling wind. The trees opened up into a small clearing, and a cabin materialized from the snow. It was bigger than I'd expected, 2 stories, with dark windows that reflected nothing. No lights, no smoke from the chimney, no sign anyone had been here recently except for one thing. Fresh tire tracks leading around to the back. Multiple sets, barely visible under the still falling snow. Jasper parked near the front door and turned off the engine. In the sudden silence, I could hear my heart pounding. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but where would I go? I was miles from anywhere in a blizzard, injured, with no phone and no idea which direction led to safety. "Come on," Jasper said, opening his door. Let's get you inside and warmed up." I didn't move. "You know what? I think I'll wait in the truck. You go ahead and get the heat going first." He turned to look at me fully, and for the first time I noticed his hands. They were covered in surgical gloves under his winter gloves, the latex barely visible at the wrists. No one wears surgical gloves for driving in a snowstorm. "Cornelius," he said, and my blood went cold. I hadn't told him my name. "Don't make this difficult. You're going to freeze to death out here one way or another. At least, inside, you have a chance." I grabbed for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Child locks, I realized. He'd activated the child locks. Panic rose in my throat as Jasper calmly got out and walked around to my side of the truck. He opened my door from the outside, and the cold rushed in again. "Please," he said, and now he sounded almost sad. "I really was trying to help at first, but you've seen too much, noticed too much. Smart man like you, 20 years on the road, you know how to read people. That's unfortunate." I swung at him, but my frozen muscles betrayed me, the punch slow and clumsy. He easily stepped aside, then grabbed my jacket and pulled me from the truck. I hit the snow hard, my injured ribs screaming in protest. Before I could get up, I heard another engine approaching. 2 more vehicles emerged from the storm, a van and another pickup. People got out, dark shapes against the white moving toward us with purpose. One of them was carrying something that looked like a medical bag. "Jasper," one of them called out. A woman's voice. "This him?" "Yeah, crashed right where Hiram said he would." Hiram, another person involved. This hadn't been a random rescue. They'd known I was coming, known I would crash. But how? The woman knelt beside me in the snow. Even through my pain and fear, I noticed she was wearing scrubs under her winter coat. "Mr. Cornelius," she said, her voice professionally calm. "You've been in an accident. You're in shock. We're here to help." "No," I managed, trying to crawl away. "You're not. This isn't." "Hypothermia causes confusion, paranoia," she continued, speaking to the others now as if giving a medical presentation. "He doesn't know what he's saying." More hands grabbed me, lifting me despite my struggles. They were all wearing medical gloves, I realized, every single one of them. They carried me toward the cabin, and as we got closer, I could see through one of the windows. Light inside, from battery-powered lanterns, and equipment, medical equipment. An IV stand, monitors, things that had no business being in a hunting cabin. "Please," I tried again. "People know where I am. The trucking company has GPS on the rig." "Your company's GPS showed you stopped for the mandatory rest period at the Love's truck stop in Remington," Jasper said conversationally. "You've been off the grid for the last 2 hours. Terrible weather after all. Lots of accidents tonight. Lots of missing people who won't be found until the snow melts." They carried me through the door into warmth that should have been welcome but felt like walking into a trap. The main room had been converted into something between a field hospital and a laboratory. Plastic sheeting on the floors, surgical lights powered by humming generators, and that smell, antiseptic mixed with something else, something that made my stomach turn. They set me down on what looked like a modified gurney, and immediately the woman in scrubs started checking my vitals. Her movements were professional, practiced, but there was something mechanical about them, like she was going through motions she'd done too many times before. "Blood pressure's elevated," she announced. "Pulses rapid, possible internal bleeding from the crash." "I'm fine," I said, trying to sit up, but Jasper placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Let Dr. Morrison examine you," he said. "She's very good at what she does." Morrison. The name hit me like ice water. I'd heard that name before on the CB radio, whispered conversations at truck stops. Drivers talking about someone named Morrison who was supposedly involved in those organ trafficking rumors that had been circulating for years. But those were just stories, urban legends truckers told to pass the time, weren't they? Your pupils are dilated, Dr. Morrison continued, shining a penlight in my eyes. Possible concussion. We should run a full panel. A full panel? I asked. In a cabin in the woods? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. We're better equipped than you might think. Hiram prepped the IV. A younger man, barely out of his 20s from the look of him, wheeled over an IV stand. His hands were shaking slightly as he prepared the needle, and unlike the others, he wouldn't meet my eyes. What's in that? I demanded, trying to pull away, but Jasper and another man held me down. Just saline and something for the pain, Dr. Morrison said soothingly. You've been through trauma. You need fluids. I don't consent to this. This is kidnapping. The needle went in anyway, a sharp prick in my arm, and within seconds I could feel something cold flowing into my veins. Not saline. I'd had IV fluids before after a bad case of food poisoning. This was different, heavier, with a metallic taste that somehow appeared in my mouth. That's it, Dr. Morrison said. Just relax. Let the medication work. My vision started to blur around the edges, but I fought it. 20 years of staying alert through exhaustion, of fighting off sleep during those long hauls, had given me some resistance. I could hear them talking, their voices becoming distant but still audible. Blood type? Someone asked. Oh, negative, Dr. Morrison replied. Universal donor, very valuable. The client in Milwaukee? Still waiting. We'll need to move fast once the storm clears. I tried to process what I was hearing, but my thoughts were becoming syrupy, slow. They were talking about blood types, clients, moving fast. The organ trafficking stories weren't just stories. They were real, and I was about to become part of them. He's fighting it, Hiram said, and I could hear fear in his voice. Should we increase the dose? No, Dr. Morrison said sharply. Too much, and we risk damaging the organs. He's a big man. It'll just take longer. Organs, plural. They weren't just planning to take my blood. They were planning to take everything. I had to stay conscious, had to find a way out. I focused on the pain in my ribs, using it as an anchor to keep from sliding into the darkness. Through my blurred vision, I could see the room more clearly now. There were coolers stacked against one wall, medical-grade ones with biohazard symbols. A chart on another wall with what looked like shipping schedules, routes marked across the Midwest. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold, despite the drugs. In the corner, partially hidden by a curtain, was another gurney. Someone was on it, covered by a sheet, but I could see a foot sticking out. A foot wearing a trucker's boot, just like mine. The other one's ready for transport, someone said, noticing where I was looking. Once this storm clears, we can move both shipments. Other one. Another trucker, probably with a similar story. Broken down or crashed in the storm, rescued by Good Samaritan Jasper, brought here to help. How many times had they done this? How many drivers had disappeared into this cabin in the woods? His eyes are still tracking, Hiram observed nervously. He's still conscious. Dr. Morrison came over and looked down at me, studying my face with clinical detachment. Remarkable constitution, she said. The adrenaline from the crash must be counteracting the sedative. Jasper, tell me again how you found him. Exactly where the scanner said he'd be, Jasper replied. That icy patch at mile marker 247 worked perfectly. Every truck that hits it at highway speed is guaranteed to jackknife. They'd caused my crash. Deliberately iced a section of highway during a storm, knowing truckers would have to maintain speed to keep schedule. It was murder, premeditated and calculated. Did you recover his phone? De Morrison asked. Still in the wreck, probably, but it doesn't matter. The storm will keep anyone from investigating for hours, maybe days. And his company? Small operation out of Fort Wayne. They won't even know he's missing until he fails to deliver tomorrow afternoon. They'd researched me, knew my route, my company, everything. This wasn't random. I'd been selected, targeted, hunted. I tried to speak, to scream, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. Only a low groan escaped, barely audible over the generator's hum. Increase the dose, Dr. Morrison finally decided. We can't have him conscious for the next part. Hiram adjusted something on the IV, and this time the darkness came rushing in like a tide. But just before I went under, I heard something that gave me hope. A voice from outside, muffled by the storm but clearly agitated. State police are running the highways. They found the truck already. The last thing I heard was Dr. Morrison cursing, followed by rapid movement, people running, equipment being moved. Then nothing. When I came to, I didn't know how much time had passed. Minutes? Hours? The room was darker, most of the surgical lights turned off. I could hear voices from another room, urgent, arguing. We leave now, Dr. Morrison was saying. Take what we can. Destroy the rest. What about him? That was Jasper. He's seen too much. We can't leave him. So we take him with us? No. Too risky with the police searching. We finish the extraction here, take what we can use, leave the rest. Extraction. They were going to kill me, harvest whatever organs they could, and leave my body here. I tested my limbs. The drugs were wearing off, but I was still weak, uncoordinated. The IV was still in my arm, but the bag was nearly empty. I turned my head slowly, looking for anything I could use. There, on a table just within reach, surgical instruments laid out on a sterile cloth. If I could just reach them. The door opened, and Hiram walked in alone. He stopped when he saw I was awake, and for a moment we just stared at each other. He was young, maybe 22, with the kind of face that belonged in a college classroom, not this house of horrors. "Please," I whispered, my voice barely working. "You don't have to do this." He looked toward the door, then back at me. "I don't have a choice. They have my sister, said they'd kill her if I don't help. We can go to the police together. They'll protect her." "No." He shook his head. "You don't understand. These people are connected. They have cops, judges, doctors, and hospitals. There's nowhere safe. Then help me escape. We'll both run." He was quiet for a long moment, clearly conflicted. Then he moved to the IV and did something I didn't expect. He removed the needle from my arm. "The state police really are coming," he whispered. "Someone found your truck, called it in. They'll be here soon, but not soon enough. Dr. Morrison is going to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Help me up." "I can't. They'll know." "Then give me something, anything, a weapon, a phone, something." He looked around frantically, then grabbed something from a medical bag. A scalpel, small but sharp. He pressed it into my hand. "Play dead when they come for you," he whispered. "It might buy you time." Before I could respond, Dr. Morrison's voice called from the other room. "Hiram, prep him for emergency extraction. We have 15 minutes maximum." Hiram squeezed my shoulder once, then called back, "On it." He wheeled over a tray of surgical equipment, his hands shaking as he arranged it. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Dr. Morrison entered, now wearing surgical scrubs and gloves. Jasper was with her, and 2 other men I didn't recognize. They all looked tense, rushed. "Is he under?" she asked Hiram. "Yes," he lied, "completely unconscious." I closed my eyes, forced my breathing to slow, made my body go limp. The scalpel was hidden under my palm, pressed against the gurney. Good. We'll take the kidneys first. They're the most valuable. Then liver, heart if we have time. I felt them moving around me, heard the clink of instruments. Someone started cutting my shirt open. The cold air hit my chest, and it took everything I had not to shiver. "Wait," Jasper said suddenly. "You hear that?" Everyone stopped. In the distance, barely audible over the storm, were sirens. Multiple sirens getting closer. "Damn it," Dr. Morrison hissed. "How did they find us so fast?" "The kid must have talked," one of the men said, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. "I'll deal with him." "No time," Dr. Morrison said. "Grab the coolers with the preserved specimens. Leave everything else." "What about him?" Jasper asked, meaning me. Dead men tell no tales. I felt someone lean over me, felt breath on my face. This was it. I gripped the scalpel, ready to fight for my life with whatever strength I had left. Then the door exploded inward. "State police! Nobody move!" Chaos erupted. Shouting, running, something crashing to the floor. I opened my eyes to see officers flooding the room, weapons drawn. Dr. Morrison was backing toward the rear door, her hands up but her eyes calculating. Jasper had dropped to his knees immediately, but one of the other men made a run for it. "He's alive!" someone shouted, pointing at me. "We need medics in here now!" A state trooper appeared beside me, young, professional, his hand on his weapon as he scanned for threats. "Sir, are you okay? Can you speak?" "Cornelius," I managed. "My name is Cornelius. They were going to—" "You're safe now," he said. "Medics are coming." I watched them arrest Dr. Morrison, saw the shock on her face when Hiram pointed her out as the leader. He was cooperating, telling them everything, about the other trucker under the sheet, about the operation, about how many others there had been. As real paramedics loaded me onto a proper gurney, I caught Hiram's eye. He was in handcuffs, but there was relief on his face. He'd be going to prison, but his sister would be safe. Sometimes that's the only choice you get, not between good and bad, but between bad and worse. The next several hours blurred together in a haze of emergency rooms, detective interviews, and medical examinations. The real paramedics found 3 cracked ribs, severe hypothermia, and enough sedatives in my system to knock out a horse. The fact that I'd remained conscious at all was, according to the ER doctor, borderline miraculous. Detective Raymond Kruger from the state police stayed with me through most of it. He was a veteran cop, late 50s, with the kind of weathered face that had seen too much but hadn't given up yet. He waited patiently while nurses checked my vitals, then pulled up a chair beside my hospital bed. "Cornelius, I need you to understand something," he said, his voice grave. "What you stumbled into tonight is part of something we've been investigating for 3 years. You're the first survivor who's actually conscious and able to testify." "The first?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "We've found 14 bodies in the last 3 years. All truckers, all missing organs. Most were so decomposed by the time we found them that we couldn't determine cause of death. You're the first one we've caught them in the act. 14. 14 drivers who'd never made it home, whose families were probably still wondering what happened. Hiram said they had his sister," I told him, "that they forced him to help." Kruger nodded. "We're looking into that. He's cooperating fully, giving us names, locations, everything. Turns out Dr. Morrison, her real name is Dr. Angela Thorne, by the way, has been running this operation across 3 states. She had a legitimate medical license, even worked at Chicago Presbyterian until 2 years ago when she was quietly let go for ethical violations." "And Jasper?" Jasper Whitman, ex-military, dishonorably discharged for black market dealings in Afghanistan. He was their procurer, finding targets, setting traps, doing the dirty work. That ice patch that caused your crash? He spent 2 hours this afternoon spraying water on that exact spot, creating a perfect trap. The calculated nature of it made me sick. While I'd been checking my load, planning my route, these people had been setting up my death trap. The client in Milwaukee they mentioned, I said. We're tracking it down. Hiram gave us a list of regular clients. You'd be horrified how many wealthy people are willing to pay for organs, no questions asked. We're talking state senators, CEOs, people with enough money to bypass the normal transplant lists. A nurse came in to adjust my IV, a real IV this time, with actual saline and antibiotics. I flinched when she approached with the needle, and she gave me a sympathetic look. "It's okay," she said gently. "You're safe here. There's an officer stationed outside your door, and we've got security on high alert." After she left, Kruger continued. "We found something else in that cabin, records going back 5 years. Your company, Cornelius, they were specifically targeting small, independent operations. Drivers who wouldn't have corporate resources looking for them immediately. My dispatcher already contacted. Your load is being recovered and rerouted. Your truck, well, insurance will handle that. But you're alive, and that's what matters." I thought about my truck, lying on its side in the snow. 20 years I'd been driving, and this was how it ended. But Kruger was right. I was alive. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now, we build a case. Your testimony, combined with Hiram's cooperation and the evidence from the cabin, should be enough to put them away for life. But I need to be honest with you. Dr. Thorne has connections. Good lawyers, this won't be easy." Over the next few days, as I recovered in the hospital, the full scope of the operation became clear. The news media got hold of the story, and suddenly my face was on every channel. "Miracle Trucker Survives Organ Harvesting Ring," the headline screamed. Reporters camped outside the hospital, all wanting to hear my story. But what the media didn't report were the details that kept me awake at night. The coolers full of preserved organs that police found, labeled with dates and blood types like inventory in a warehouse. The other trucker on that gurney, identified as Robert Henley from Omaha, who'd been missing for 3 days. His family had been told he'd probably skidded off the road in the storm, that they'd find him when the snow melted. Hiram's sister was found, alive and unharmed, in an apartment in Gary, Indiana. She hadn't even known she was being used as leverage. The people watching her had told her they were friends of her brother, keeping her safe while he was away on business. The psychological torture they'd put Hiram through, making him believe she was in danger, was just another tool in their arsenal. I testified before a grand jury 2 weeks later. By then, I could walk without pain, though the memory of that night still made my hands shake. Dr. Thorne sat across the courtroom, dressed in an expensive suit, looking more like a respected physician than a monster who carved up truckers for profit. Her lawyer tried to paint me as confused, traumatized, possibly mistaken about what I'd seen and heard. But Hiram's testimony backed up everything I said. He'd kept records of his own, dates and names hidden in an encrypted file on his laptop. He knew that someday he might need evidence to save himself or his sister. That evidence included recordings he'd secretly made of Dr. Thorne discussing the organ sales, talking about clients, even joking about how easy it was to make truckers disappear. Jasper Whitman tried to cut a deal, offering to testify against Dr. Thorne in exchange for a lighter sentence. But the prosecutor had enough evidence without him. He was looking at life without parole, and he knew it. During the trial, he stared at me with those pale eyes, and I could see him calculating, still looking for an angle. an escape route that didn't exist. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of testimony from forensic experts, other survivors who'd had near misses with the ring, families of victims who finally had answers about what happened to their loved ones. The prosecution presented evidence of a network that stretched from Chicago to Milwaukee to Detroit, with connections to illegal medical facilities that catered to wealthy clients desperate for organs. They showed financial records proving that Dr. Thorne had made over $10 million in 5 years. $10 million from the suffering and death of innocent truckers. She'd bought a house in the Hamptons, a yacht, traveled the world on the blood of working men who just wanted to make an honest living. When the verdict came down, guilty on all counts, I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I felt empty. Justice had been served, but those 14 truckers were still dead. Their families still had empty chairs at dinner tables. And I still woke up every night in a cold sweat, feeling phantom I-4 needles in my arm, hearing Dr. Thorne's clinical voice discussing my organs like I was cattle. The aftermath was almost as hard as the event itself. I couldn't drive anymore. Every time I got behind the wheel, even of a regular car, I'd have panic attacks. The sound of wind against windows made me think of that blizzard. The smell of antiseptic made me sick. I tried therapy, medication, everything the doctors suggested, but some wounds don't heal clean. My wife, Rachel, tried to be supportive, but she didn't understand why I couldn't just move on. We'd been separated before all this happened, trying to work things out, but the trauma drove the final wedge between us. She filed for divorce 6 months after the trial. I didn't contest it. She deserved better than a husband who woke up screaming and couldn't stand to be touched because it reminded him of gloved hands holding him down. I moved to a small apartment in Fort Wayne, close to my brother Stanley and his family. Stanley ran a hardware store, offered me a job that didn't involve driving. It was honest work, helping customers find the right tools, mixing paint, organizing inventory. Nothing like the open road, but stable, safe. One day, about a year after the incident, a young man came into the store. I recognized him immediately, though he'd changed. Hiram had lost weight, his face gaunt, eyes holding a sadness that probably matched my own. He'd served 8 months in minimum security and was on probation for 5 years. "Cornelius," he said quietly. I wasn't sure if I should come, but I needed to say something. I could have called the police, could have made a scene. Instead, I led him to the break room, poured 2 cups of terrible coffee, and sat down across from him. "I'm sorry," he said, the words tumbling out. "I know it doesn't mean anything, doesn't change anything, but I'm so sorry. I think about that night every day. If I'd been stronger, if I'd gone to the police despite their threats. You saved my life," I told him. "When you pulled that IV, when you gave me the scalpel, you saved my life. I helped put you in that position in the first place. You were trying to save your sister. I can't say I wouldn't have done the same in your position." We talked for an hour. He told me about prison, about the other inmates who'd treated him like a hero for testifying against Dr. Thorne. He told me about his sister, who was in college now, studying to be a social worker. She wanted to help people who'd been victimized, to make some good come from the horror. Before he left, Hiram handed me an envelope. "I know money doesn't fix anything, but this is my first payment. I'm going to send you something every month for the rest of my life. It's not enough, will never be enough, but it's something." I tried to refuse, but he insisted. In the envelope was $200 cash and a note that just said, "Thank you for surviving." I never cashed his money. Every month an envelope would arrive, and I'd add it to a box in my closet. Maybe someday I'd donate it to a trucker's charity or a victim's fund. For For now, it was just a reminder that even in the darkest moments, people could choose to do the right thing. The nightmares continued, but they changed over time. Instead of reliving that night in the cabin, I'd dream about the truckers who didn't make it. They'd be sitting in my apartment drinking coffee, talking about their roots, their families, the lives that were stolen from them. Robert Henley was always there. The trucker from that other gurney telling me about his kids, showing me pictures of grandchildren he'd never meet. 3 years have passed now since that night in the blizzard. Dr. Thorne is serving life without parole in a maximum security prison. Jasper Whitman killed himself in his cell 6 months into his sentence, unable to face decades in a cage. The other members of the ring got various sentences, from 10 years to life, depending on their involvement. The trucking industry changed too. Companies started implementing better check-in procedures, GPS tracking that couldn't be spoofed, panic buttons in cabs. The FBI created a task force specifically for crimes targeting long-haul drivers. It was too late for the 14 who died, but maybe it would save others. I still work at Stanley's hardware store, still live in my small apartment, still wake up some nights feeling the cold of that blizzard, the weight of those hands holding me down. But I also wake up, which is more than those 14 drivers can say. Sometimes customers recognize me from the news coverage, want to shake my hand, call me a hero. I'm not a hero, I'm just a trucker who got lucky, who had one person with a conscience in a room full of monsters. Heroes are the ones who choose to do right even when it costs them everything. That's Hiram, turning evidence against people who threatened his sister. That's Detective Kruger, who spent 3 years chasing shadows to find these killers. That's the families of those 14 truckers, who somehow find the strength to keep going despite their loss. The story should have ended there, with justice served and me trying to rebuild some semblance of a normal life. But evil doesn't always stay buried, and the network Dr. Thorne had built was more extensive than anyone realized. It started with small things: hang-up calls to the hardware store, cars parked across from my apartment for hours with tinted windows, mail that had clearly been opened and resealed. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the trauma was making me see threats that weren't there. But when Stanley mentioned that someone had been asking about me, a well-dressed woman claiming to be a journalist but refusing to leave contact information, I knew my instincts were right. The 4th winter after the incident, almost to the day, I got a call that changed everything. It was Detective Kruger, and he sounded tired, worried. "Cornelius, I need you to listen carefully. Dr. Thorne was killed in prison yesterday." "Good," I said, and meant it. "No, you don't understand. She was killed by another inmate who claims someone paid him to do it. Someone on the outside wanted her silenced. Why would? Because she was about to testify in a new case. The feds found evidence of another ring, bigger than hers, operating out of Canada. She was going to trade information for a transfer to minimum security. Now she's dead, and our only lead is gone." I felt the familiar cold creeping up my spine. What does this have to do with me? Her lawyer had a visitor the day before she died. Security footage showed a man we couldn't identify, but he left something behind. A partial fingerprint on the sign-in sheet. We ran it through every database we had and got nothing. Then Hiram called me. "Hiram?" He saw the security footage on the news. Says he recognizes the man from the cabin that night. Someone he only saw once in the background, but memorable because of his eyes. One blue, one green. Heterochromia. Ring any bells? I searched my memory of that horrible night, but so much of it was blurred by drugs and fear. No, I don't remember anyone like that. Well, he apparently remembers you. Hiram says this man was asking Dr. Thorne about you specifically that night. What you'd seen, what you'd heard, what you might have overheard about their connections. But I testified to everything I knew. Maybe. Or maybe you know something you don't realize you know. Either way, we think you might be in danger. I'm sending a patrol car to your apartment. But by the time the patrol car arrived, I was already gone. Call it trucker's instinct or just paranoia finally paying off, but I'd packed a go-bag the moment Kruger mentioned the heterochromia. I went out to the back window, down the fire escape, and disappeared into the Fort Wayne night. I couldn't go to Stanley. I wouldn't put his family in danger. Couldn't go to any friends for the same reason. So I did what I'd done for 20 years. I got on the road. Not in a truck this time, but in a beat-up Honda Civic I bought with cash from a guy selling it in a grocery store parking lot. For 3 days, I drove aimlessly, staying in cash-only motels, keeping my head down. I was at a truck stop near Toledo, buying coffee and trying to figure out my next move, when I saw him. Or rather, I saw his eyes in the security mirror above the register, one blue, one green, watching me from the coffee station. He was tall, thin, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place among the truckers and travelers. When our eyes met in the mirror, he smiled and raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. I left my coffee on the counter and walked quickly but calmly toward the exit. He followed, not rushing, maintaining that same easy smile. In the parking lot, I broke into a run toward my car, but he called out, "Cornelius, let's talk. I have a proposition." I stopped, turned. He was standing by a black Mercedes, hands visible, clearly unarmed. Up close, those mismatched eyes were even more unsettling. 5 minutes, he said. That's all I ask. Then you can run, call the police, whatever makes you feel safe. Talk from there, I said, keeping my distance. My name is Victor Keene. I represent certain interests that were inconvenienced by Dr. Thorne's operation. Not morally, you understand, but financially. She was sloppy, drew attention, made the entire industry harder to manage. Industry, you mean murdering truckers for their organs. I mean providing life-saving medical services to those who can afford them. But let's not debate ethics. I'm here to offer you something Dr. Thorne never could. Complete safety. In exchange for what? Silence. Complete and total silence. You've testified, justice was served, story over. But if more investigations happen, if more questions get asked, if you cooperate with this new Canadian inquiry, well, that would be problematic. You're threatening me. No, I'm offering you a business arrangement. $1 million deposited in any account you specify in exchange for your permanent relocation and silence. You disappear, we forget you exist, everyone wins. And if I refuse? He sighed, pulled out his phone, and showed me a photo. It was Stanley's daughter, my niece, walking to school. The photo was dated yesterday. Let me be clear, Victor said, his tone shifting from businesslike to ice-cold. Dr. Thorne was an amateur who let emotion cloud her judgment. We are not amateurs. We don't need to harm you or your family. That's messy, draws attention. But we can make life very difficult. Stanley's business could fail. Your nephew could lose his college scholarship. Your ex-wife Rachel could have problems at her job. Death isn't the only threat, Cornelius. The FBI will protect them. The FBI couldn't protect Dr. Thorne in a maximum security prison. What makes you think they can protect civilians living normal lives? He had a point, and we both knew it. The network he represented had resources, connections, patience. They could destroy lives without leaving fingerprints. I need time to think, I said. 24 hours. Then I call you with account details. He handed me a burner phone. Don't bother trying to trace it or record calls, and don't throw it away. It's how we'll know you're cooperating. He got in his Mercedes and drove away. leaving me standing in a truck stop parking lot, holding a phone that felt like a live grenade. I sat in my car for an hour, trying to think through options. Go to the FBI? They'd try to use me as bait, put my family at risk. Take the money and run? That made me complicit in future murders. Fight back somehow, against an organization with unlimited resources and no conscience. Finally, I called the one person who might understand, Hiram. He answered on the third ring. Cornelius? How did you get this number? Directory assistant still exists. Listen, I just met Victor Keene. Long silence, then, are you somewhere safe? For now. Don't take his deal. I know it seems like the only option, but it's not. Meet me tomorrow, noon, at the rest stop on I-69, mile marker 157. Come alone and watch for tails. Hiram, what's going on? There are others like us. Survivors, witnesses, people who've seen too much. We've been organizing, sharing information. Victor Keene and his network think they're untouchable, but they're wrong. We just need to be smart about how we fight them. This isn't a movie. These people have killed 14 truckers that we know about, probably dozens more. They're still doing it, just more carefully. Someone has to stop them. He was right. Taking Victor's money would make me safe, but it would damn every future victim. I thought about Robert Henley on that gurney, the 14 dead truckers, all the ones who might come after. I'll be there, I said. The next day, I arrived at the rest stop early, paranoid about ambush. But Hiram came alone as promised, driving a pickup that had seen better days. He looked healthier than when I'd last seen him. Stronger, more determined. There are 12 of us, he said without preamble. Survivors, family members of victims, even a few cops who've been pushed off cases. We share information, track patterns, build evidence. The FBI won't act without proof, so we're getting them proof. That's dangerous. So is doing nothing. Victor's network has killed at least 40 people that we can document. They're connected to organ trafficking rings in 6 countries. They own judges, cops, even federal agents, but they have one weakness. They think they're invisible. He pulled out a laptop, showed me spreadsheets, photographs, shipping manifests. The work of obsessive investigation, connecting dots law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't see. We tracked one of their operations to a warehouse in Buffalo, he said. They're moving organs through legitimate medical supply companies, hiding them in shipments of legal tissue samples. We have photos, recordings, everything. Then why haven't you gone to the authorities? We tried. The investigation got shut down from above. Someone warned them, and by the time police arrived, the warehouse was clean. That's when we realized we needed a different approach, which is public exposure. Media, internet, everywhere at once. Make it too big to cover up, too public to silence everyone involved. But we need more evidence, and we need someone they won't see coming. Me. You take Victor's deal, but you wear a wire. Get him talking, get him to admit to the murders, the network, everything. One good recording, and we can blow this whole thing open. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was probably going to get me killed. But I thought about those 14 truckers, about future victims, about my niece's photo on Victor's phone. Okay, I said, I'll do it. What followed were 3 days of preparation. Hiram had connections. A former FBI tech who provided surveillance equipment. A journalist ready to publish everything. A lawyer prepared to file federal charges the moment we had evidence. They taught me how to wear the wire, how to guide conversation, how to signal if I was in trouble. Victor called exactly 24 hours after our first meeting, as promised. I told him I'd take the deal, but wanted to meet in person to discuss details. He agreed, suggested a private dining room at an upscale Chicago restaurant. public enough that I'd feel safe, private enough for real conversation. The day of the meeting, I was terrified. The wire felt obvious against my chest, like it was broadcasting "I'm wearing a wire" to everyone who looked at me. But I walked into that restaurant, was escorted to the private room, and found Victor already there sipping wine. "Cornelius," he said warmly, "I'm glad you've chosen the sensible path." "I want guarantees," I said, sitting down. "My family stays safe permanently." "Of course. We're not monsters, despite what you might think. We're businessmen providing a service. A service that kills innocent people." He sighed. "The truckers. Yes, that was regrettable. Dr. Thorne's methods were crude, wasteful. We've since refined our approach." "Refined how?" "We no longer target healthy individuals. Instead, we've developed relationships with hospices, terminal wards, places where death is already imminent. Much cleaner, more ethical even. You're still trafficking organs. We're saving lives. The wealthy deserve health care too, don't they? Why should they die waiting on lists when organs are available? Because you're murdering people to get them. We're past tense. As I said, we've evolved." He poured me wine, which I didn't touch. "The truckers were Dr. Thorne's project. Unsanctioned, I might add. When we discovered what she was doing, we were appalled." "So appalled, you let her continue for 5 years?" "We didn't know the full extent until your testimony. Once we did, we took action." "You had her killed." He smiled. "She had many enemies in prison. Who's to say which one finally acted? You're admitting to murder. I'm admitting to nothing. I'm simply observing that violent criminals often meet violent ends." I was getting frustrated. He was too careful, too practiced. I needed him to be more explicit. "What about the others? The 14 truckers who died?" 15, actually. The authorities never found Mitchell Flores. He's still listed as missing, but Dr. Thorne's records were quite clear about his fate. 15. There was another victim no one knew about. "Where's his body?" "Who knows? Dr. Thorne wasn't meticulous about disposal. Probably in a landfill somewhere or dissolved in acid. She had methods. And you knew about these methods. Everyone in our industry knew Dr. Thorne was reckless. But she produced results, quality organs that saved lives. Sometimes in business you overlook personality flaws for productivity." "Personality flaws?" "She was a serial killer. She was a surgeon who found an innovative supply chain. Crude, yes. Immoral, perhaps. But innovative." I felt sick, but I pressed on. "And now? How do you get organs now?" "As I said, terminal patients. Natural deaths. Paperwork that's perhaps not entirely legitimate but harm-free. No more truckers, Cornelius. That pipeline is closed. Because of me. Because of you. Which is why this $1 million is really a bargain for us. Your silence ensures no further investigations into past indiscretions. And if I hadn't agreed..." He leaned back, studied me with those mismatched eyes. "Then you'd have had an accident. Nothing dramatic. Heart attack, perhaps. Stroke. Something that wouldn't raise questions. We have compounds that mimic natural causes perfectly." There it was. Admission of potential murder. But I needed more. "Like what you did to the truckers." "No, they needed to be fresh for harvesting. Quick sedation, then surgical extraction while the heart still pumped. Your death would have been gentler. A courtesy for the trouble you've caused us." How thoughtful. "We're not sadists, Cornelius, we're pragmatists. The truckers felt no pain. Dr. Thorne insisted on that, sedated fully before the procedures began." "Procedures? You mean cutting them open while they were still alive?" "Technically alive. Brain dead from the sedatives, but the organs remained viable. It's actually quite fascinating from a medical perspective. It's murder. It's commerce, supply and demand. Those truckers' organs saved dozens of lives. Wealthy lives, yes, but still human beings who would have died otherwise. I wanted to reach across the table and strangle him, but I forced myself to stay calm. The wire was getting everything. How many others are involved, this network of yours? Enough. Doctors, lawyers, politicians. People you'd recognize if I named them. That's why fighting us is futile, Cornelius. We're not some criminal gang. We're integrated into the fabric of society itself. The FBI will find you eventually. The FBI employs us. 3 of our clients are senior agents whose children needed organs. They're quite grateful for our services. My blood went cold. If he was telling the truth, the corruption went higher than anyone imagined. So, what now? I asked. I take your money and disappear? Exactly. We've prepared new identification, a complete history, even a job if you want it. You'll cease to be Cornelius, become someone else entirely, someone with no connection to trucking or organ harvesting or anything unpleasant. And my family will prosper. Stanley's hardware store will suddenly get a contract with a major chain. Your nephew's scholarship will be expanded. Your ex-wife will receive a promotion. Everyone wins, except the next victims. There won't be any next victims. I told you, we've evolved past such crude methods. I don't believe you. He shrugged. Belief isn't required. Only silence. He pulled out a tablet, showed me bank accounts, transfer authorizations, all ready to execute. $1 million waiting for my agreement. I need a guarantee, I said, written, signed, legally binding. You want a contract for illegal activity? I want insurance. Something that ensures you keep your word, he laughed. Very well. I'll have our lawyers draft something. Carefully worded, of course, but sufficient for your needs. He stood up. We'll meet again tomorrow, same place, to finalize everything. After he left, I sat in that private dining room for 10 minutes, afraid to move. Afraid the wire would somehow reveal itself retroactively. Finally, I stood and walked out, trying to look casual despite the sweat soaking through my shirt. Hiram was waiting in a van 2 blocks away. The moment I got in, he asked, "Did you get it?" I pulled off the wire, handed it to the tech. Everything. Admission of murder, conspiracy, names of victims, even corruption in the FBI. The journalist, a woman named Patricia Knox, who'd been investigating organ trafficking for years, listened to the recording with tears in her eyes. "This is it," she said. "This breaks everything open." But I wasn't done. He mentioned Mitchell Flores, a 15th victim nobody knows about. We need to find his family, let them know. We will, Patricia promised. But first, we need to get this recording to people who can act on it. Real FBI, not the corrupted ones. How do we know who's clean? I have a contact, Hiram said. Agent Jennifer Maxwell. She's been investigating the organ rings independently, off the books because she suspects corruption in her department. She'll know what to do. That night, while Victor thought I was considering his contract, the recording was being copied, transcribed, and distributed to law enforcement agencies across 3 states. Patricia's story was written, ready to publish simultaneously in 6 major newspapers. The network that had seemed invincible was about to be exposed. The next day, I went to meet Victor as planned, but this time I wasn't alone. FBI agents, the clean ones, were positioned throughout the restaurant. State police surrounded the building. Everyone was ready. Victor arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather folder with what I assumed was the contract. He sat down, that same confident smile on his face. "Shall we conclude our business?" he asked. "Actually," I said, "I have a counteroffer." His smile faltered slightly. "Oh? Turn yourself in. Testify against the network. Take the deal the FBI is about to offer you." He started to stand, but the door opened and Agent Maxwell walked in, followed by 6 other agents. "Victor Keene," she said, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, organ trafficking, and violation of federal medical regulations." He looked at me, those mismatched eyes showing surprise for the first time. "You wore a wire." "Yesterday, yes. Today I'm just the bait." As they cuffed him, he shook his head. "You have no idea what you've done. The people I work for, they don't forgive. They don't forget." "Neither do I," said. "Neither do the families of 15 dead truckers." The arrest of Victor Keene triggered a cascade of investigations. Patricia's story hit the front pages, causing national outrage. Within a week, 43 people were arrested across 6 states. The network, so confident in its invisibility, crumbled as members turned on each other for plea deals. They found Mitchell Flores's remains based on records recovered from Victor's encrypted files. His family finally had closure after 2 years of wondering. I attended his funeral, stood with the families of all 15 truckers, and we mourned together. The trials took 2 years. I testified in 8 of them, each time reliving that night in the cabin, but also the conversation with Victor. His admission, captured clearly on the wire, became the key piece of evidence that brought down the entire network. Victor got life without parole. His lawyers, all complicit in the network, were disbarred and imprisoned. The corrupt FBI agents were exposed and prosecuted. The wealthy clients who'd bought organs were charged as accessories to murder. But the real victory came when Congress passed the Truckers' Protection Act, mandating panic buttons in all commercial vehicles, regular check-ins for solo drivers, and severe penalties for crimes targeting transportation workers. It wasn't enough, could never be enough, but it was something. I never did take Victor's $1 million, but I didn't need to. The Truckers' Benevolent Association raised funds for all the survivors and victims' families. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to start over. I moved back to Fort Wayne, went back to work at Stanley's hardware store. The nightmares still come, but less frequently. I still flinch at medical smells, still check mirrors obsessively, still feel phantom eye fours in my arm. But I also feel something else: pride. We'd done what seemed impossible. A group of traumatized survivors and grieving families had brought down a criminal network that owned judges and cops. We'd proven that ordinary people, when they stand together, can fight back against extraordinary evil. Hiram and I stay in touch. He's a counselor now, working with trauma victims. His sister graduated college, became a social worker as planned. She helps victims of human trafficking, turning her brother's nightmare into purpose. Detective Kruger retired last year, but not before seeing every member of the network convicted. At his retirement party, he pulled me aside and said, "You know what the real victory was? Not the convictions. It was proving that 15 truckers mattered, that their lives had value beyond their cargo." He was right. For too long, truckers had been invisible victims, their disappearances written off as accidents or abandonment. Now, everyone knew the truth. We weren't just statistics or acceptable losses, we were fathers, brothers, friends. We were human beings who deserved justice. As I write this, it's been 5 years since that blizzard. 5 years since Jasper's truck emerged from the snow to rescue me. I still drive sometimes, not trucks but regular cars, and every time I pass a semi on the highway, I think about the driver inside. Are they safe? Do they know about the panic button, the check-in procedures, the protections we fought to create? Most of all, I think about the 15 who didn't make it. Robert Henley, Mitchell Flores, and 13 others whose names are now engraved on a memorial at the Truckers' Hall of Fame. They didn't get to testify, didn't get to see justice served, didn't get to go home, But they're not forgotten. Their sacrifice exposed a horror that might have continued indefinitely. Saved future lives we'll never be able to count. That's the thing about survival. It comes with responsibility. The responsibility to bear witness, to fight back, to ensure the dead aren't forgotten. Every time I tell this story, every time someone reads about what happened, those 15 truckers live again in memory. The storm that night nearly killed me. Jasper and his network tried to harvest me like cattle. But I survived, and that survival became a weapon against them. Sometimes the best revenge isn't violence or hatred. It's simply refusing to die, refusing to be silenced, refusing to let evil win. I still check weather reports obsessively, still avoid driving in blizzards, still feel my chest tighten when I see medical equipment. But I'm alive. I'm free. And somewhere out there, truckers are driving through the night a little bit safer because 15 of their brothers didn't die in vain. That's my story. Every word of it true, documented in court records and FBI files. It's a story of horror, but also of hope, of ordinary people facing extraordinary evil and winning, of justice delayed but not denied. If you're a trucker reading this, remember, trust your instincts. If someone seems too helpful, too convenient, too good to be true in bad weather, they probably are. Your life is worth more than any schedule, any cargo, any delivery deadline. And if you're ever outside Chicago in a blizzard and someone offers to help, make sure you can see both their eyes are the same color. It might just save your life. My name is Amos, and I've been hauling freight across the Midwest for 18 years. Started when I was 25, right after I got out of the military, and trucking became my whole life. The open road, the solitude, the steady paycheck. It all made sense to me in a way that civilian life never quite did after Afghanistan. By the time this story happened, in late October of last year, I thought I'd seen everything the job could throw at me. I was wrong. It was a Thursday afternoon when dispatch called me with an unusual request. I was already loaded up in Indianapolis, carrying a shipment of medical supplies bound for Milwaukee, when they asked if I could make an additional stop in Chicago. Some specialty medical equipment needed to be delivered to a research facility on the south side. The pay was exceptional. Triple the normal rate for what should have been a simple 2-hour detour. The client's name is Ezekiel Marsh, the dispatcher told me. He runs a private medical research facility. Says it's extremely time-sensitive, some kind of experimental treatment that can't be delayed. I should have asked more questions. Should have wondered why a research facility would need a delivery at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night. Should have questioned why they were paying so much for what seemed like a routine drop-off. But I'd been driving for 16 hours already. I was tired, and the money was too good to pass up. My daughter Emma was starting college next year, and every extra dollar helped. The address they gave me was in an industrial district I'd never delivered to before. One of those areas that had been thriving in the 1960s, but had been slowly dying ever since. As I drove through the empty streets, my GPS kept trying to recalculate, confused by roads that existed on the map but seemed to lead nowhere. Half the streetlights were out, and the ones that worked cast this sickly orange glow that made everything look diseased. The building itself was massive, a 6-story brick structure that took up an entire city block. According to the faded sign above the main entrance, it used to be St. Bartholomew's Hospital, established 1923, but it had clearly been abandoned for years. Windows were boarded up, graffiti covered the lower walls, and weeds grew through cracks in the parking lot. This couldn't be right. I double-checked the address, then triple-checked it. This was definitely the place. I tried calling the client, Ezekiel Marsh, using the number dispatch had given me. It rang once, Then a voice answered immediately, like he'd been waiting by the phone. "Amos, you're here? Excellent. I'll meet you at the loading dock on the east side of the building." His voice was cultured, educated, with just a trace of an accent I couldn't place. European, maybe, but filtered through years of American living. "Mr. Marsh, this building looks abandoned. Are you sure? Appearances can be deceiving. We maintain a low profile for security reasons. Valuable research, you understand. Please, the loading dock, east side." The loading dock was in better condition than the rest of the building, with newer concrete and functioning lights. As I backed my trailer up to the platform, a door opened and 3 men emerged. 2 were young, maybe mid-20s, wearing white lab coats that looked too clean, too new. The third was older, probably 60, with silver hair and piercing gray eyes. He walked with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. "Mr. Amos," he said, extending his hand. "Ezekiel Marsh. Thank you for accommodating our unusual schedule." His handshake was firm but cold, his skin surprisingly soft for someone his age. Up close, I noticed his lab coat had small dark stains on the sleeves, the kind that looked like old blood that hadn't quite washed out. "Where do you want the equipment?" I asked, trying to keep things professional despite my growing unease. "We'll handle the unloading. But first, there's been a slight complication. The freight elevator's temporarily out of service. We'll need to use the interior stairs, which means breaking down the larger items. Would you mind assisting? I'll add another $1,000 to your fee for the inconvenience." $1,000 to help carry some boxes upstairs? My radar was pinging hard now, but I thought about Emma's tuition and nodded. "Sure, I can help." The 2 younger men started opening my trailer, and I noticed they seemed to know exactly what they were looking for. They bypassed the Milwaukee shipment entirely, going straight to 3 specific crates marked with biohazard symbols. Those weren't on my manifest. I would have remembered biohazard materials. They required special documentation. "Hold on," I said. "Those crates aren't supposed to be here. They're not on my shipping list." Ezekiel smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "A clerical error, I'm sure. These are definitely ours, ordered through the usual channels. I can't release cargo that's not on my manifest. That's federal law." The smile faded. "Mr. Amos, we're conducting important medical research here. Life-saving research. Surely a small bureaucratic hiccup shouldn't prevent sick people from receiving treatment. I need to call dispatch." "There's no cell service in this area," one of the younger men said quickly. Too quickly. Something about the old building materials interfering with signals. I pulled out my phone. Full bars. 4G. I started to dial, but Ezekiel placed his hand over my phone. His touch was still cold, despite the warm evening. "Please," he said, and something in his tone changed. Became more urgent, almost desperate. "These supplies are critical. We have patients depending on them." "Patients? In an abandoned hospital?" "Not abandoned, repurposed. We operate a discreet facility for clients who require privacy." "What kind of clients?" "The kind who pay very well for experimental treatments not yet approved by the FDA. Surely you can understand the need for discretion." I looked at the 3 of them, then at the dark building looming above us. Every instinct I'd developed in 18 years of trucking and 4 years in Afghanistan was screaming at me to leave. But Ezekiel pulled out a roll of cash, peeled off $200 bills, and held them out to me. $2,000 extra. Just help us carry these crates inside. 30 minutes of work, maximum. I stared at the money. Emma's tuition, my mortgage, the truck repairs I'd been putting off. $2,000 for 30 minutes of work. "Just carrying boxes?" I asked. "Nothing more. You have my word." I took the money, shoved it in my pocket, and immediately regretted it. But I grabbed one end of the first crate while one of the younger men took the other. It was heavier than I expected, and something inside shifted when we lifted it. Not like solid equipment shifting, more like liquid, or something semi-solid. We carried it through the loading dock door into a hallway that didn't match the building's exterior at all. While outside looked abandoned, inside was clean, well lit, with fresh paint on the walls and new fluorescent fixtures overhead. The air smelled of disinfectant and something else, something organic and unpleasant underneath the chemical smell. "This way," Ezekiel said, leading us down the hallway. We passed several doors, all closed, but I could hear things behind them. Machines humming, what sounded like running water. And once, just for a moment, something that might have been crying or laughing. It was hard to tell. "You renovated this place?" I asked, trying to make conversation and calm my nerves. "Partially," Ezekiel replied. "We maintain the exterior's appearance to avoid unwanted attention. The interior, however, has been fully modernized for our needs." We reached a freight elevator that was clearly not out of service. It was new, recently installed, with digital controls and a security keypad. Ezekiel typed in a code, and the doors opened with a soft chime. "I thought you said the elevator was broken," I said. "The main freight elevator," he said smoothly. "This is the secondary one. It has weight restrictions, hence the need to break down the shipment into smaller loads." We rode up to the fourth floor in silence. When the doors opened, the smell hit me immediately. Stronger here, that organic odor barely masked by industrial-strength disinfectant. The hallway stretched in both directions, lined with doors that had small windows at eye level. Some were dark, but others showed glimpses of light and movement inside. "Storage room 4B, Ezekiel said, leading us to the right. As we walked, I glanced through one of the lit windows and immediately wished I hadn't. The room beyond was set up like an operating theater, with surgical lights and equipment I couldn't identify. But what made me stumble was what was on the table. It was covered by a sheet, but the shape underneath was wrong. Too many angles, too many bulges in places where there shouldn't be any. "Eyes forward, please," Ezekiel said sharply. "Our research is confidential." We reached room 4B, and Ezekiel unlocked it with another keypad code. Inside was what looked like a legitimate storage area. Shelves lined with medical supplies, refrigeration units humming against one wall, boxes neatly labeled and stacked. We set the crate down, and I was ready to leave, but the younger men were already heading back for the next one. "2 more trips," Ezekiel said. "Then you're done." The second trip was worse because now I knew what to listen for. Behind those closed doors I could hear more sounds. Machinery definitely, but also voices. Muffled, indistinct, but definitely human. Some sounded like they were in pain. Others were having conversations, though I couldn't make out the words. And from somewhere deeper in the building came a rhythmic pounding, like someone banging on a door. "Quite an operation you have here," I said, fishing for information. "We're proud of our work," Ezekiel replied. "We're pushing the boundaries of medical science. Treatments that were thought impossible just years ago are now within reach." "What kind of treatments?" "Gene therapy, organ regeneration, life extension. The future of medicine is being written in buildings like this, Mr. Amos, away from the suffocating regulations and ethical hand-wringing of traditional institutions." We deposited the second crate and headed back for the third. By now, my nerves were completely shot. I just wanted to get the last crate delivered and get out of there. But as we were loading it onto a hand truck at the loading dock, I heard something that made my blood freeze. A voice coming from inside the crate itself. Muffled, weak, but definitely human. "Please, someone, help me." I dropped my end of the crate immediately and it hit the ground with a crash. The two younger men exchanged panicked looks, and Ezekiel's face went from friendly to furious in an instant. "What's in this crate?" I demanded, backing away. "Nothing that concerns you," Ezekiel said, his voice ice cold now. "You've been paid. Complete the delivery. There's someone in there. You're mistaken. The contents shifted, that's all. Sometimes the preservation fluids can create air pockets that sound like preservation fluids. What the hell are you preserving?" The voice came again, louder this time. "Help! Can anyone hear me? Please!" It was a man's voice, terrified, desperate. I moved toward the crate, but one of the younger men stepped in front of me. He'd pulled back his lab coat, revealing a pistol tucked into his waistband. "I think you should leave now," he said. "Not without knowing what's in that crate." "That would be inadvisable," Ezekiel said. He'd pulled out his phone and was typing something. "You have family, don't you, Mr. Amos? A daughter, Emma, starting at Northwestern next year. Pre-med, according to her social media. Very ambitious." My blood went cold. "How do you—" "We research everything, Mr. Amos, everyone. It's remarkable what you can learn with the right resources. For instance, your ex-wife Linda lives at 482 Maple Street in Naperville. Your daughter spends weekends there. They're probably asleep right now, safe and sound. It would be tragic if something were to disturb that peace. You're threatening my family? I'm encouraging you to make smart decisions. Walk away now. Forget what you think you heard, and everyone stays safe. Or continue asking questions and accept the consequences." The man in the crate was pounding now, screaming. The sound was horrible, desperate, the sound of someone who knew they were running out of time. I had to make a decision. My family's safety versus whoever was in that crate. It wasn't really a choice at all, was it? But then I thought about what kind of man I'd be if I walked away. What kind of father? What would I tell Emma when she asked me why I looked so haunted? How could I live with myself? "Let him out," I said. "Let him out and I'll leave. I won't say anything to anyone. Just let whoever's in there go." Ezekiel laughed, a sound without any warmth. "You really don't understand what you've stumbled into, do you? This isn't some small operation. We have clients across the country, powerful clients, the kind who don't accept disappointment. I don't care about your clients, there's a person in that box." "Not for much longer," one of the younger men muttered, and the other one shot him a sharp look. That's when I made my move. 18 years of loading and unloading had kept me in shape, and 4 years in the military had taught me how to fight. I grabbed the hand truck and swung it like a bat, catching the armed man in the side of the head. He went down hard, the gun skittering across the concrete. The other young man lunged at me, but I'd already grabbed a crowbar from my truck's toolkit. I caught him in the stomach, doubling him over, then pushed past him toward the crate. Ezekiel was backing away, still typing on his phone, probably calling for help. I jammed the crowbar into the crate's lid and started prying. The wood splintered, revealing some kind of complex locking mechanism underneath. But I could see air holes now, and fingers pushing through them, desperate, grasping. "Hold on," I shouted. "I'm getting you out." "Behind you," the voice inside warned. I spun just as the man I'd hit with the hand truck was getting up, reaching for his gun. I threw the crowbar at him, making him duck, then rushed him. We went down together, wrestling for the weapon. He was younger, but I was bigger, and desperation gave me strength. I managed to get the gun away and scrambled to my feet, pointing it at all three of them. "Open the crate," I ordered. "You have no idea what you're doing," Ezekiel said. "The person in there isn't who you think they are. They're not innocent. I don't care. Open it." Ezekiel nodded to one of his men, who pulled out a keycard and swiped it across a reader on the crate's lock. There was a beep, then a click, and the lid popped open. The man inside sat up gasping, his face pale and sweaty, his clothes soaked with some kind of clear fluid. He was middle-aged, balding, wearing what looked like a hospital gown. His arms were covered in injection marks, and there was a bandage around his head that was seeping blood. "Thank God," he gasped. "Thank you. I thought I was going to die in there." "Who are you?" I asked, keeping the gun trained on Ezekiel and his men. "My name is Dr. Harold Crenshaw. I was a researcher here, until I found out what they were really doing, which is, they're not conducting medical research. They're harvesting, taking organs, tissue, bone marrow from living subjects, some voluntary, desperate people who need money. Others," he looked at me with haunted eyes, "others aren't so willing." "You're delusional," Ezekiel said calmly. "Dr. Crenshaw suffered a psychotic break. We were transporting him to a psychiatric facility for treatment." "In a shipping crate?" I asked. "He became violent. It was for his own safety." Dr. Crenshaw laughed bitterly. "My own safety? You were taking me to the disposal site. I know too much. Just like Dr. Patterson knew too much. And Nurse Williams. And all the others who asked too many questions." "We need to go," I said to Crenshaw. "Can you walk?" He nodded, climbing out of the crate on shaky legs. "There are others," he said. "Other people in the building. Patients, subjects, whatever you want to call them. We can't leave them." "We're leaving now," I said, backing toward my truck while keeping the gun on Ezekiel. "You won't make it 2 blocks," Ezekiel said. "I've already alerted security. They'll be here in minutes." As if on cue, I heard vehicles approaching, multiple engines coming fast. We had maybe 30 seconds before they arrived. "Get in the truck," I told Crenshaw, but he was shaking his head. "I can't leave them. Room 3C. There's a young woman there, Sarah. She's only 22. They took her kidney last week and they're planning to take the other one tomorrow. And room 3F, there's a man named James. They've been draining his bone marrow for months. We can't save everyone," I said, pulling him toward the truck. "We need to get out and call the police." "The police won't come," Ezekiel said, with that cold smile. "We have arrangements, understandings. You'd be surprised how many people benefit from our work." The vehicles were getting closer. I could see headlights now, 3 sets, converging on the loading dock. We were out of time. I made a split-second decision that probably saved our lives. Instead of trying to run to my truck, which was blocked in by the approaching vehicles, I grabbed Dr. Crenshaw and pulled him back into the building. Ezekiel's eyes widened in surprise. "Lock it down!" he shouted to his men. But we were already through the door, running down that too-clean hallway. Behind us, I heard Ezekiel yelling orders, feet pounding on concrete, radios crackling. The building that had seemed so quiet and controlled was suddenly alive with activity. Doors were opening, voices shouting, alarms beginning to wail. "This way," Crenshaw gasped, pulling me left at an intersection. "There's another exit through the old emergency room." We ran past more doors with those little windows, and now faces were pressed against them. Some looked desperate, others resigned. A few seemed barely conscious. How many people were being held here? "We have to help them," Crenshaw said again. "We help them by getting out and bringing real cops," I replied, though the image of those faces would haunt me forever. We burst through a set of double doors into what had once been the hospital's emergency room. It was mostly stripped now, just empty beds and broken equipment pushed against the walls. But there was an exit sign glowing above a door on the far side. That's when someone stepped out from behind an overturned gurney. Not one of Ezekiel's lab-coated assistants, but a massive man in security gear, carrying what looked like a tactical shotgun. His name tag read, Obadiah. "Mr. Marsh wants you to return to the loading dock," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for such a large man. "Both of you." I still had the pistol I'd taken, and I raised it, though my hands were shaking. "We're leaving." Obadiah shook his head slowly. "No, sir, you're not. That pistol has no bullets. Mr. Jonas never keeps it loaded. Too much liability, he says." My heart sank. I pulled the trigger anyway. Click, empty. "Now," Obadiah continued, "you can come quietly, or I can make you come. Mr. Marsh prefers the first option. Less mess." "You know what they're doing here?" I asked. "You know they're killing people." "I know they're paying me very well not to ask questions," Obadiah replied. "Been doing that for 3 years now. Not about to stop because some truck driver got curious." Dr. Crenshaw stepped forward. "Obadiah, you helped me with my research when I first started. Remember? We talked about your daughter, how she wants to be a doctor someday. Is this the kind of medicine you want her practicing?" Something flickered in Obadiah's eyes. Doubt, maybe, or shame. But he steadied the shotgun. "My daughter's medical school isn't going to pay for itself, Doc. I'm sorry about this, I really am, but you should have stayed quiet like the rest of us." That's when we heard the screaming. Not from behind us, but from somewhere above. A woman's voice, terrified and in pain. It went on for maybe 10 seconds, then cut off abruptly. "Room 3C, Crenshaw whispered. "They're taking her other kidney. They moved up the schedule because of us." Obadiah's jaw tightened, but he didn't lower the gun. "Not my problem." "It's everyone's problem," I shouted. "How can you stand there and—" The lights went out. For a moment, there was absolute darkness. Then, emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow that made the abandoned ER look like something out of a nightmare. "What the hell?" Obadiah muttered, reaching for his radio. A voice came over the building's intercom system, but it wasn't Ezekiel. It was younger, female, and furious. "This is Dr. Patricia Vance. I've disabled the main power grid and locked down all security systems. The police have been called. The real police, not your paid-off contacts. FBI, too. You have 5 minutes before they arrive." Ezekiel's voice crackled over Obadiah's radio. "Code Black. All security to the server room. Protect the data at all costs." Obadiah looked torn, glancing between us and the door. The radio squawked again. "Obadiah, where are you? We need you at the servers now." "Go," I said. "Stop them from destroying evidence. Maybe it'll count for something when the cops get here." He stared at me for a long moment, then lowered the shotgun. "4th floor," he said quietly. "Room 4J. That's where they keep the kids." "Kids?" My blood went cold. "Runaways mostly, nobody to miss them." He looked sick saying it. I never went in there, couldn't, but I knew. He turned and ran toward the stairwell, either to help Ezekiel or to stop him, I couldn't tell. "We have to get them," Crenshaw said immediately. "The cops will be here in 5 minutes. Ezekiel will kill them all before then, destroy all the evidence, including the witnesses." He was right. I could already smell smoke coming from somewhere above. They were burning documents, probably destroying hard drives, eliminating any trace of what they'd done. And if they were willing to kill evidence— "Let's go," I said. We ran for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. The 2nd floor was chaos. People in lab coats running with boxes of files, security guards shouting orders, smoke beginning to fill the hallways. Nobody paid attention to us in the confusion. The third floor was worse. Some of the doors were open now, and patients were stumbling out. Men and women in hospital gowns, some with fresh surgical scars, others barely able to walk. They looked confused, terrified, lost. "Emergency exit is that way," Crenshaw shouted to them, pointing toward the far end of the hall. "Get out now!" Some listened and ran. Others seemed too traumatized or drugged to understand. We couldn't save them all. We had to focus on the kids. The fourth floor was eerily quiet compared to the chaos below. The smoke was thicker here, and I could see flames flickering through some doorways. They were destroying everything. Room 4J was at the end of the hall. The door was locked, but I still had the empty pistol, and I used it to smash the lock mechanism. The door swung open, revealing a scene that still appears in my nightmares. 6 kids, ranging from maybe 10 to 16, all in hospital beds. IV lines in their arms, monitoring equipment beeping steadily. They were unconscious or sedated, I couldn't tell which. Charts at the foot of each bed listed blood types, tissue compatibility markers, and scheduled procedures. "Help me disconnect them," Crenshaw said, already moving to the nearest bed. It was a girl, maybe 13, with dark hair and a pale face. As he removed her IV, her eyes fluttered open. "Are you my doctor?" she asked groggily. "I'm getting you out of here," he said. "Can you walk?" She tried to sit up, wobbled, then nodded. "I think so." We worked quickly, disconnecting IVs, helping kids sit up, supporting those who could barely stand. One boy, probably 15, was more alert than the others. "Are you cops?" he asked. "No, but they're coming," I said. "We need to get you all out before—" The door slammed shut behind us. Ezekiel stood there with 2 security guards, and this time their guns were definitely loaded. "I'm disappointed, Mr. Amos," he said. "You could have walked away. Now you're going to disappear, just like Dr. Crenshaw was supposed to." "The FBI is coming," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "No, they're not. Dr. Vance's little stunt was impressive, but we have protocols for such situations." The calls were intercepted, redirected. "A hazmat team will arrive shortly. Our hazmat team. They'll find a terrible chemical spill, no survivors, and the building will be condemned and demolished within the week." "You're insane." "I'm practical. Do you know how much a young, healthy heart is worth on the black market? A liver, kidneys? These children are worth millions, and their absence won't even be noticed. They're nobody. Runaways, drug addicts, throwaways. They're kids," I shouted. "They're inventory," he corrected coldly. "And you're disrupting my supply chain." One of the kids, the alert boy, suddenly spoke up. "I'm not nobody. My name is Michael Torres. I'm from Cicero. My mom's name is Maria, and she's looking for me. She never stopped looking." The girl Crenshaw had woken added, "I'm Jennifer Huang. I have a sister. She thinks I'm dead, but I'm not." One by one, the other kids started saying their names, their voices getting stronger. David, Ashley, Carlos, Brittany. They weren't inventory, they were people, and they were done being silent. Ezekiel's face twisted with annoyance. "Enough! Sedate them all. We'll move them to the backup facility." That's when everything happened at once. The window behind Ezekiel exploded inward. Not from a gunshot or explosion, but from a fire axe wielded by someone outside. A woman in a lab coat climbed through. Dr. Patricia Vance, I assumed. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with fierce eyes and blood on her hands from the broken glass. "The real FBI is here," she announced. "I sent the evidence directly to their cybercrimes division. Locations of all your facilities, client lists, financial records, everything." Ezekiel spun toward her, and I took my chance. I grabbed a metal IV stand and swung it like a club, catching one guard in the knee. He went down, screaming. Crenshaw, showing more courage than I'd expected, tackled the other guard's legs. Ezekiel pulled out a small pistol, but Patricia was already moving. She had a syringe in her hand, and she plunged it into his neck before he could aim. He dropped the gun, his eyes going wide. "Succinylcholine," she said calmly. "Paralytic agent. You'll be fully conscious, but unable to move for the next 20 minutes. Long enough for the authorities to arrive." Ezekiel collapsed, his eyes darting frantically but his body completely still. The guards were down, one unconscious, the other moaning and clutching his knee. "We need to go," Patricia said. "I set fires in the lab areas to destroy their biological samples, but it's spreading faster than I planned." We could hear sirens now, real ones, getting closer. But we could also hear the building groaning, feel the heat rising through the floors. We had minutes, maybe less. "Can they walk?" Patricia asked, looking at the kids. "We'll carry them if we have to," I said. We made a strange procession, 3 adults supporting 6 barely conscious kids, making our way through smoke-filled hallways. Other patients had found their way out of their rooms and were following us, a growing crowd of the wounded and traumatized. The stairwell was full of smoke. We couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, and the kids were coughing, struggling to breathe. I picked up the smallest one, a girl who couldn't have been more than 11, and carried her. Crenshaw and Patricia each supported 2 others, while Michael, the most alert, helped guide the last one. 3 floors, 2 floors. The heat was getting worse, and I could hear the fire spreading above us, eating through the old building's bones. We burst through the first-floor door into the main lobby, where chaos reigned. FBI agents in tactical gear were pouring through the front entrance. Some of Ezekiel's security guards were surrendering, hands up, while others were trying to flee through side exits. Paramedics were setting up triage areas, and firefighters were running hoses into the building. "We've got kids here," I shouted. "They need medical attention." Paramedics rushed over, taking the children from us, checking vitals, starting oxygen. I watched them work, making sure each kid was accounted for, each name recorded. They weren't going to disappear again. An FBI agent approached me, weapon drawn but not aimed. "Are you Amos?" I nodded, suddenly exhausted. "We need to debrief you immediately. You're the primary witness to—" "Ezekiel Marsh is on the 4th floor," I interrupted. "Room 4J. He's paralyzed but conscious. Don't let him die. He needs to answer for this." The agent spoke into his radio, sending a team up. Then he looked at me more carefully. "You're the truck driver, the one who called this in?" "I didn't call anything in. That was her." I pointed to Patricia, who was being checked by paramedics for cuts from the window glass. "But you rescued the children." "We all did. Crenshaw, Patricia, even one of the security guards told us where they were." The agent nodded, making notes. "We're going to need detailed statements from all of you. This is bigger than we thought. Dr. Vance's data dump shows facilities in 12 states. 12 states. How many buildings like this? How many kids? How many desperate people carved up for parts?" I sat down on the curb outside, watching the building burn. The fire department was trying to control it, but the old structure was going up fast. Whatever evidence was still inside was being destroyed, but Patricia had saved the digital records. That would have to be enough. Michael Torres, the boy who'd spoken up, was on a gurney nearby. He caught my eye and nodded just once. A thank you, maybe. Or just acknowledgement that we'd both survived something horrible. My phone buzzed. Multiple missed calls from dispatch, from my ex-wife, from Emma. Word was already spreading. I called Emma first. "Dad, are you okay? The news is saying something about a human trafficking ring in Chicago and a truck driver who—" "I'm okay," I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. "I'm safe." "Did you really save those kids?" I thought about how to answer. I hadn't meant to save anyone. I just wanted to deliver my cargo and go home. But sometimes life doesn't give you that choice. Sometimes you have to decide in a moment whether to be the person who walks away or the person who does something. "Yeah," I said finally. "I guess I did." The next 3 months were a whirlwind of FBI interviews, grand jury testimonies, and media attention I never wanted. The story exploded across every news outlet in the country. Trucker discovers organ harvesting ring. Children rescued from medical trafficking operation, the Chicago Horror Hospital. They all wanted interviews, book deals, movie rights. I turned them all down. I just wanted to go back to driving my truck and forget any of it happened. But you can't forget something like that. You can't unsee those kids in their beds, can't unhear the desperation in Dr. Crenshaw's voice when he was trapped in that crate. The FBI assigned me a protection detail after they started arresting people connected to Ezekiel's network. Turns out he wasn't lying about having powerful clients. 3 state senators, a federal judge, 2 hospital administrators, and a pharmaceutical executive were all indicted. The trials were scheduled to begin in January, and I was going to be the star witness. The prosecution said my testimony, combined with Dr. Patricia Vance's data dump and the physical evidence recovered from the building, would ensure convictions. But Ezekiel himself was a problem. The paralytic drug Patricia had injected him with had caused complications. He'd had a stroke while in custody, leaving him partially paralyzed and unable to speak clearly. His lawyers were arguing he was incompetent to stand trial, that his condition made it impossible for him to assist in his own defense. It was bullshit. His eyes were still sharp, still calculating, but it was slowing everything down. Meanwhile, the kids we'd rescued were recovering in various foster homes and facilities. Michael Torres had been reunited with his mother, and the video of their reunion had gone viral. Jennifer Huang's sister had flown in from Seattle, sobbing when she saw her. The others were slowly piecing their lives back together with counseling and medical care. But there were complications. Medical complications. Whatever had been done to those kids in that building had left lasting damage. They all had organ damage to varying degrees, compromised immune systems, psychological trauma that might never fully heal. The youngest girl, the one I'd carried down the stairs, had developed kidney failure and needed dialysis 3 times a week. Dr. Crenshaw, who'd become something of a friend through all this, explained it to me one day over coffee. They were being systematically prepared for harvesting. Small doses of immunosuppressants to make their organs more viable for transplant. Careful monitoring of their blood chemistry. Selective damage to create scarcity. Scarcity? If a child has 2 healthy kidneys, you might wait for the perfect buyer. But if one kidney is failing, suddenly the other becomes much more valuable. Supply and demand, even in horror. I wanted to throw up. How could you work there? How could you not know? He stared into his coffee. I did know. Part of me anyway. But I told myself I was doing legitimate research, that the subjects were volunteers, that the children were just runaways being given medical care. I was very good at lying to myself until I couldn't anymore. What changed? I found out about the disposal protocols. What happened to subjects who were no longer useful? There's a crematorium in the basement, industrial grade. They were burning evidence, literally. That's when I tried to leave, and that's when they decided I knew too much. We sat in silence for a while. Then he said something that chilled me more than anything else in this whole nightmare. It's not over, you know. Ezekiel's operation was just one tentacle of something much bigger. The demand for organs hasn't gone away. The wealthy clients haven't stopped needing transplants. Someone else is already filling the void. He was right. 2 weeks later, the FBI raided a warehouse in Detroit and found a similar operation. A week after that, another in St. Louis. The network was like a hydra. Cut off one head, 2 more appeared. And the really terrifying part was how professional it all was. These weren't back-alley criminals. They were doctors, nurses, people with medical degrees and hospital experience. I tried to go back to work, but it was impossible. Every time I got a call for a delivery to a medical facility, I'd break out in a cold sweat. Every time I saw an abandoned building, I wondered what might be happening inside. My employer was understanding at first, but after I turned down the 5th delivery in a row, they had to let me go. "I'm sorry, Amos," my dispatcher said, "but we need drivers who can actually drive." I understood, but understanding didn't pay the bills. My savings were running out, Emma's tuition was due, and I was sleeping maybe 3 hours a night on a good day. The protection detail had been reduced to periodic check-ins after no credible threats materialized, but I still jumped every time someone knocked on my door. That's when I got an unexpected call. It was Obadiah, the security guard from the building. He was calling from federal prison where he was serving 5 years for conspiracy charges. He'd cooperated with authorities, testified against Ezekiel's network, but he'd still been part of it. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything," he said, his voice tinny through the prison phone system. "But I need to tell you something. There's another facility, one the FBI doesn't know about." My hand tightened on the phone. "Where?" "Gary, Indiana. Old steel mill on the south side. Ezekiel mentioned it once when he thought I wasn't listening. Said it was the backup location if Chicago ever got compromised." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see those kids' faces every night when I close my eyes. Because my daughter won't talk to me anymore. Because maybe if I help stop this, it'll mean something. Tell the FBI." I did. They said without concrete evidence they can't get a warrant. An old steel mill in Gary describes about 20 buildings, but I remembered something else. Ezekiel had a partner, someone he only referred to as the surgeon. Real name is Dr. Simon Blackwood. He's supposed to be running the Gary facility. I wrote down everything Obadiah told me, then sat staring at the information. The smart thing would be to pass it along to the FBI and let them handle it eventually. The safe thing would be to forget I ever heard it. But I kept thinking about those kids in room 4J, about how many more might be in that steel mill right now. I called Patricia Vance. She'd become something of an activist since the Chicago incident, using her medical knowledge to expose organ trafficking networks. She answered on the second ring. "Amos, are you okay?" I told her about Obadiah's call, about the Gary facility. She was quiet for a long moment. "We can't go to the FBI with this," she said finally. "Not yet. If there's a leak, if someone tips off this Dr. Blackwood, he'll disappear everyone and everything, just like Ezekiel tried to do." "So what do we do?" "We get proof, photos, documents, something concrete that forces the FBI to act immediately." "Patricia, I'm a truck driver, not a private investigator. You're a truck driver who saved 6 kids and exposed a multi-state trafficking ring. You're exactly who we need." I wanted to say no. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to stay away, to let someone else handle it. But I couldn't stop thinking about that 11-year-old girl on dialysis, about Michael Torres reuniting with his mother, about all the kids who might not get rescued if we waited for official channels. "When?" I asked. "Tonight. The longer we wait, the more chance they have to move operations." That evening, Patricia picked me up in a rented van. She'd brought equipment, cameras with night vision, a drone for aerial surveillance, bolt cutters, and disturbingly, a small medical kit just in case, doctor. Crenshaw was with her, looking nervous but determined. "You didn't have to come," I told him. "Yes, I did. I helped create this monster. I need to help destroy it." The drive to Gary took about an hour. The city had been dying for decades, ever since the steel industry collapsed and whole neighborhoods were abandoned. The perfect place to hide something horrible. The mill Obadiah had described was a massive complex of rusted buildings and broken windows, surrounded by a chain-link fence that had seen better days. From the outside, it looked completely abandoned. No lights, no vehicles, no signs of life. But Patricia's drone spotted something interesting. Fresh tire tracks leading to a loading dock on the north side, and what looked like new ventilation equipment on one of the roofs. "Someone's been here recently," she said, studying the drone footage on her tablet. We found a section of fence that had been cut and poorly repaired, slipped through, and made our way across the overgrown lot. The place felt wrong, the same way Ezekiel's building had felt wrong. Too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath. The loading dock door was locked, but it was a cheap padlock that Patricia's bolt cutters handled easily. Inside was darkness so complete it seemed solid. We used our flashlights sparingly, not wanting to announce our presence. The first floor was genuinely abandoned. Rusted machinery, broken glass, graffiti from urban explorers. But Patricia found something the casual observer would miss. Fresh scratches on the floor near a service elevator, like something heavy had been dragged recently. The elevator itself was supposedly out of service, but when Crenshaw pried open the control panel, he found modern wiring hidden behind the old mechanisms. "This is still functional," he whispered. "Someone's maintaining it." We took the stairs instead, not trusting the elevator. The second floor was more of the same abandonment, but on the third floor, things changed. The dust patterns were wrong. Paths through the grime where people had walked recently. Some doors had new locks installed, and there was that smell again. Disinfectant trying to mask something organic. Patricia was documenting everything with her camera when we heard it. Voices coming from somewhere above. We froze, listening. It was muffled, but definitely human speech. Multiple people having a conversation. We crept up to the fourth floor, where the voices were clearer. Light was coming from under one door at the end of the hall. As we got closer, we could make out words. "Schedule for tomorrow. 3 procedures, all high-priority clients." "Do we have the necessary inventory?" 2 confirmed. Still waiting on the third. "The courier should arrive tonight. Make sure receiving is ready." Courier. Arriving tonight. They were expecting someone. Patricia looked at me, her face pale in the dim light. We had to make a decision. Document what we could and leave, or try to see what was behind that door. Before we could decide, we heard footsteps on the stairs below us. Multiple sets, climbing fast. Someone else was arriving, and we were trapped on the 4th floor with nowhere to hide. Crenshaw grabbed my arm and pointed to a door marked Maintenance. It was unlocked, and we slipped inside just as the footsteps reached our floor. The room was full of old cleaning supplies and equipment, with barely enough space for the 3 of us to crouch behind a large industrial sink. Through a crack in the door, we watched as 4 people walked past. 3 were wearing medical scrubs and surgical masks. The 4th was in street clothes, and I recognized him immediately from the trials I'd been watching on the news. It was Dr. Kenneth Reeves, the pharmaceutical executive who'd been indicted in Ezekiel's case. He was out on bail, awaiting trial, and supposedly under house arrest with an ankle monitor. Yet here he was, walking into what was clearly another organ trafficking facility. "We need to get out," Patricia whispered. "Now we have proof." Reeves being here violates his bail conditions. The FBI will have to act. But as we started to leave our hiding spot, we heard something that stopped us cold. A child crying. Not from the room where the voices were, but from somewhere else on the floor. Young. Scared, in pain. I looked at Patricia and Crenshaw. We all knew what the smart move was. We had evidence. We could leave, call the FBI, and have this place raided within hours. But hours might be too late for that child. We can't leave them, I said. Amos, we don't know how many people are here. We don't know if they're armed. We don't... Another cry, weaker this time. Then a man's voice, harsh and annoyed. Increase the sedation. We can't have it making noise when the clients arrive. Clients. Arriving tonight. This wasn't just an organ harvesting facility. This was a showroom. They were bringing buyers here to select their inventory in person. How many do you think we have? Another voice asked. 6 units ready for viewing. 3 pediatric, 3 adult. The Blackwood Special Selection. Dr. Simon Blackwood, the surgeon. He was here, and he had 6 people ready to be parted out to the highest bidder. We couldn't wait for the FBI. By the time they arrived, those 6 people might be gone, disappeared into the network's transportation system, never to be seen again. We had to do something now. But what could 3 people do against an unknown number of criminals in a building we didn't know, with no weapons and no backup? That's when Crenshaw surprised me. I have an idea, he whispered, but it's dangerous, and it might get us all killed. Let's hear it, I said. Every medical facility, even an illegal one, has to have certain safety protocols. Oxygen tanks, anesthesia, volatile chemicals. If we can find their storage area and create a controlled leak, the fumes would force an evacuation. They'd have to get everyone out. Including the victims, Patricia added, understanding immediately. Exactly. And in the chaos, we call 911, report a chemical leak at this address. Hazmat teams, fire department, police, everyone would respond. The criminals couldn't stop that many witnesses. It was insane. It was dangerous. It could go wrong in 1,000 different ways, but it was better than doing nothing. Where would they store that stuff? I asked. Crenshaw thought for a moment. Basement, probably. Away from the procedure rooms, but easily accessible. We'd need to find the service areas. We slipped out of the maintenance room and headed back toward the stairs. The voices from the lit room continued, discussing preparations for the client's arrival. We had maybe an hour before this place became a lot more crowded. The basement was a maze of rusted pipes and abandoned machinery, but Crenshaw knew what to look for. We found the storage area behind a door marked with hazmat symbols, new ones, recently applied. Inside were tanks of oxygen, nitrous oxide, and various anesthetic gases, all properly labeled and organized. This wasn't some amateur operation. "This'll work," Crenshaw said, examining the connections. "But we need to be careful. Too much and we could cause an actual explosion." "How much is too much?" I asked. "We're about to find out." He started working on the valves while Patricia kept watch. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, waiting for someone to discover us. Crenshaw opened 3 different tanks just slightly, creating a slow but steady leak. "The gas is heavier than air," he explained. "It'll pool down here first, then rise through the ventilation system. In about 15 minutes, the concentration will be high enough to trigger their safety sensors if they have them. If not, someone will smell it and panic. And then we get the hell out and call everyone we can think of." We made our way back to the first floor, but as we reached the main entrance, we heard vehicles approaching. Multiple engines, doors slamming, voices. The clients were arriving early. "Back door," Patricia whispered, and we ran through the darkness toward the rear of the building. The back exit was chained shut, but the bolt cutters made quick work of it. We burst out into the night air just as we heard the first shouts from inside the building. Someone had noticed the gas. "Evacuate! Everyone out! Gas leak in the basement!" We ran to Patricia's van, and she immediately started calling 911 while I called the FBI emergency line. Crenshaw was documenting everything with the camera, getting shots of people fleeing the building. 911, what's your emergency? There's a chemical leak at the old Brackenridge steel mill in Gary, Patricia said, giving the address. Multiple people exposed, possible casualties. We need hazmat teams immediately. I was on with the FBI trying to explain. This is Amos Richardson, witness in the Ezekiel Marsh case. I'm at an organ trafficking facility in Gary, Indiana. Dr. Kenneth Reeves is here, violating his bail. They have 6 victims inside, including children. The chaos was immediate and beautiful. People were pouring out of the building. Medical staff, security, and hopefully the victims. In the distance, sirens were already wailing. The Gary Fire Department was less than 5 minutes away. That's when I saw him. Dr. Simon Blackwood, the surgeon himself. He was older than I'd expected, maybe 70, with white hair and a face that might have been kindly if you didn't know what he did. He was directing the evacuation, calm and controlled, like this was just another drill. Then he saw us, saw me specifically, recognized me from the news coverage. His eyes narrowed, and he started walking toward us. "Drive," I told Patricia. "Now." But before she could start the engine, Blackwood pulled out a phone and said something. Within seconds, 2 SUVs screeched around the building, blocking our exit. Security guards jumped out, weapons drawn. "Out of the van," one of them ordered. We had no choice. As we climbed out, hands raised, Blackwood approached. Up close, his eyes were the coldest thing I'd ever seen, like looking into an empty freezer. "Mr. Richardson," he said calmly, "the famous truck driver, you've cost our organization quite a bit of money." "The cops are coming," I said. "Yes, responding to a gas leak. They'll find a few safety violations, perhaps some questionable medical equipment, but nothing criminal. We've been through this before. The FBI knows Reeves is here. Dr. Reeves is receiving emergency medical treatment for exposure to toxic fumes, hardly a violation of his bail conditions." He'd thought of everything. Just like Ezekiel, he had contingencies, explanations, ways to make the horrible seem mundane. "What about the victims?" Patricia demanded. "The 6 people you were about to sell." Blackwood smiled, and it was worse than his cold eyes. "What victims? We're a private research facility. Any patients here are volunteers in clinical trials, fully documented and compensated." That's when we heard the explosion. Not huge, not the whole building, but enough. One of the upper floor windows blew out, flames licking at the night sky. Either the gas concentration had gotten too high, or someone had been stupid enough to light a cigarette. "No!" Blackwood shouted, his calm finally cracking. "The specimens! Get them out!" His security guards looked torn between holding us and helping with the evacuation. That moment of hesitation was all we needed. Fire trucks were screaming into the lot, firefighters jumping out, taking command of the scene. Police cars followed, then ambulances. A firefighter in full gear approached us. "Is anyone still inside?" "Yes," I shouted before Blackwood could speak. "4th floor. There are victims who can't walk on their own. They're being held." "He's confused," Blackwood interrupted. "The gas exposure. I'm not confused. This man is Dr. Simon Blackwood, and he's running an organ trafficking ring. Those people inside are victims, not patients." The firefighter looked between us, unsure, but then more vehicles arrived. black SUVs with government plates. The FBI had come in force. Agent Jennifer Crizzetti, who I recognized from the Ezekiel Marsh investigation, stepped out of the lead vehicle. She took one look at the scene and started barking orders. "Secure the building. No one leaves without being identified and questioned. I want every room searched, every person accounted for." "You have no authority here," Blackwood said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Dr. Simon Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy to traffic human organs, kidnapping, and about 30 other charges we'll sort out later." She nodded to her agents, who moved in with handcuffs. Blackwood looked at me with those cold eyes one last time. "You have no idea what you've done. The people we serve, the power they have. You think Ezekiel was the top? He was middle management. You think I'm the boss? I'm just another surgeon. This goes so much higher than you can imagine." They dragged him away, still talking, still making threats. But I was focused on the building, where firefighters were emerging with stretchers. 6 of them, just like Blackwood had said. But these weren't specimens or inventory, they were people. One of them was conscious. A young woman who couldn't have been more than 20. As they carried her past, she reached out and grabbed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "They said no one would come. They said no one would care. We care," I told her. "You're safe now." The next hours were controlled chaos. The building was searched top to bottom, revealing a fully functional operating theater, holding cells, and enough evidence to put everyone involved away for life. Dr. Reeves tried to claim he was there for legitimate business, but the surveillance footage Patricia had captured showed him discussing inventory and procedures. 17 people were arrested that night, including 3 doctors, 5 nurses, and various support staff. The 6 victims were all taken to hospitals, where it was discovered that 3 were on the schedule for organ removal within the next 24 hours. We'd literally saved them with hours to spare. Dr. Crenshaw was treated for smoke inhalation, but was otherwise fine. Patricia's documentation proved invaluable to the prosecution. And me? I sat in that parking lot until dawn, watching them process the scene, making sure it was really over. But Blackwood's words haunted me. This goes so much higher than you can imagine. The trials took 2 years. Ezekiel Marsh died in prison before his could conclude, the stroke finally claiming him. But Blackwood was convicted on all counts, sentenced to life without parole. Dr. Reeves got 40 years. The others received various sentences ranging from 10 years to life. The 6 victims from Gary all survived and recovered, though, like the Chicago kids, they carried scars both physical and mental. The young woman who'd thanked me, Rebecca Martinez, testified at Blackwood's trial. Her testimony about the months she'd spent in that place, the things she'd seen and heard, made several jurors cry. The investigation expanded, following the network's tentacles across the country. Dozens more arrests, hundreds of victims identified, some saved, too many lost. It became one of the largest medical trafficking investigations in U.S. history. I never went back to truck driving, couldn't. Every time I sat in a cab, I'd remember that night at St. Bartholomew's, remember Ezekiel's cold smile, remember the sound of Dr. Crenshaw's voice from inside that crate. Instead, I took a job with a victim advocacy group, using my story to push for stronger regulations, better oversight, more resources for law enforcement. Emma graduated college last spring. She's in medical school now, determined to be the kind of doctor who helps people instead of harvesting them. She says I inspire her, but the truth is she inspires me. Knowing there are young people like her entering medicine, people who've seen the worst it can become and are determined to make it better, gives me hope. Dr. Patricia Vance runs a foundation now, investigating medical crimes and supporting victims. Dr. Crenshaw works with her, using his insider knowledge to spot the signs of trafficking operations. They've helped shut down 3 more rings in the past year. Obadiah got early release for his cooperation and now works as a security consultant, teaching hospitals how to spot and prevent internal trafficking. His daughter did become a doctor, and she specializes in treating victims of medical crimes. Michael Torres, the boy from room 4J in Chicago, just started college himself. He sends me updates sometimes, pictures of normal teenage life. He's majoring in criminal justice, wants to be an FBI agent. Says he wants to be the one kicking down doors to save kids like him. The network still exists, probably. Blackwood was right about that. The demand for organs hasn't decreased, and where there's demand and money, someone will create supply. But it's harder now. The FBI has a dedicated task force. Hospitals have better screening. Truckers know to be suspicious of unusual medical deliveries to abandoned buildings. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about all the delivery drivers out there on dark roads. I wonder how many of them might stumble onto something horrible, and I hope they're brave enough or lucky enough to make the right choice. I wasn't a hero that night in Chicago. I was just a tired trucker who wanted to make some extra money for his daughter's college fund. But sometimes that's how it happens. Sometimes ordinary people stumble into extraordinary evil, and they have to decide in that moment who they're going to be. I think about those 6 kids in room 4J, about Rebecca Martinez in that steel mill, about all the ones we didn't save, and all the ones still out there waiting. And I know that as long as there are people willing to harvest humans for parts, there need to be people willing to stop them. My name is Amos Richardson. I used to be a truck driver. Now, I'm something else. A witness, an advocate, a reminder that evil exists, but so does the courage to fight it. Every time I tell this story, every time someone reads it and becomes a little more aware, a little more suspicious, a little more willing to speak up, we push back against the darkness. The abandoned building on Chicago's south side has been demolished now. The steel mill in Gary, too. But I know there are others. There will always be others. The only question is whether there will always be people willing to stop them. That Thursday night when dispatch called me with a special delivery, I thought I was just taking a detour for some extra cash. Instead, I took a detour that changed my life and saved others. Sometimes, the most important journeys are the ones we never plan to take. If you're a trucker reading this, trust your instincts. If a delivery feels wrong, if a building seems off, if the people you're dealing with make your skin crawl, listen to that feeling. You might be wrong, and that's okay. But you might be right, and that could save lives. Stay safe out there. Watch the dark roads. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous cargo isn't what's in your trailer. Sometimes it's what you discover when you open doors that were meant to stay closed.